it still smells new.
I can hear. What? What? You're going to have to talk into a mic. I've got my headphones on.
What?
Yes, I'm here.
What about the hair? Is the hair too much?
Hey, it's hot in here. Who's in charge of the thermostat?
There's a thermostat?
A few more beers in, just wait.
It'll be steamy and farty and all kind of shit in here.
We can't do that. There's a girl
No
here
shitting.
tonight.
Who's doing what now?
I'll do third part.
And this was going back.
I'll bring it in, I
Sit
guess.
on the
Unless
nice leather couch where it's safe. I'm kidding.
right.
You don't have
are you
to-
ready? Do you want me to bring it in?
Too late. Too late.
Check 1, 2.
Better make a decision quick. We got
I'm
10
just guessing the
seconds.
air quality in here is
I
not
can
going to
bring
be
it
good
in.
in a while.
I'll bring it in.
No,
right.
the air quality in here is going to be...
See how many pieces of pizza I had?
Oh man, there's no way I'm gonna get this right. Is someone
Welcome back to Common Brewing Radio. Coming to you from Texas Brewing Inc. in Haltom City, Texas. You can find us on the web at txbrewing.com and be sure to follow us on Facebook and share with your friends.
In this episode, we're going back to redo our Belgian Dark Strong quad episode because our last episode got a little out of hand and even more unintelligible at times. In fact, it was the first time we got the suggestion to add a bouncer to the show. Well, we're going to go over the style again, and we even have Shawn Kidwell from Cowtown Brewing back in studio to help. To go with the subject, we're also going to discuss cellaring your beer to keep it at its best and what might happen if you don't keep it well. So hopefully this time we can make it through the big beer lineup Stubby pulled together for us without lighting up another dumpster fire.
Before we get started, please be sure to check out our Patreon account to help support the show. Every little bit counts, and if you visit patreon.com/comeandbrewit radio, we have a variety of options for you to help keep the show going, get involved, and improve it. And starting soon, at the end of each month, we'll be doing a monthly product giveaway for all of our $5, $10, and $20 patrons.
Woohoo! Nice. What?
I'm Brandon.
Oh, I'm Stubby.
I'm Greg.
God.
I'm Chris.
You'd think we'd been drinking freaking quads already, yeah?
It's a little weird to do this without being able to hear myself and
Yeah.
speak.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the shock of the volume of the intro music threw us
yeah,
all off.
yeah.
I'm going to
Right.
go ahead and use that as an excuse.
Yes, that was it. That was it.
Even though I made it through my part of the intro just
I
fine.
think we still need our guests to introduce themselves. While
That's
they're
true,
sitting
that's
here,
true,
too.
yeah.
So who we got with us tonight?
Hi, I'm Shawn Kidwell, Cowtown Brewing Company.
Woohoo!
And I am Doug Nipper with Cowtown Brewing Company.
Well, thanks
Thanks
for
for
coming
coming
out,
in.
guys. Again.
Wait, which
Yeah.
one's the real Cowtown Brewing guy?
Oh, what is that?
What?
Both, yes. We're lucky enough to have both Cowtown
Not a
Brewing guys
game
with
show.
us.
You're
All
the
right, so
winner.
welcome back to Come and Brew It Radio. We are hunkered down in the Come and Brew It bunker, sheltering ourselves from the horrible Texas weather right now. So we're all glad to be in here warm and drinking beers that are going to warm us up even further. And like we said in the intro, we're going to hope to make it through this without getting too crazy, but we do have some big beers and some big topics to discuss tonight. So hopefully it'll go well, and hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Yeah. So what happened?
What happened?
What's happening?
What
What's
the recent
happening?
What's happening?
What's
Well,
happening?
there's one in here that's on the sheet, but it says to save it
I
for
don't know
Nigel.
if we should say this for Nigel, the thing about Dark Star being bought
Well,
by
let's just
Yeah,
touch
but-
on it, and Nigel can talk about it more when
Yeah,
it's in.
because by the time he gets back on, it may be 3 weeks, and that's old news.
You never know. You never know. So Fuller's Brewing bought Dark Star Brewing in England, and Nigel tells us that this is pretty much the equivalent of what we see here of AB or Miller or someone like that buying an independent brewery. I asked him about this. You know, I think that this subject gets a little bit convoluted in the way we talk about it, and a lot of times it sounds as though we're just bashing Budweiser because we don't like their beer or something like that, when that's really not the case. You know, what we're talking about a lot of times when we have a problem with the craft beer buyouts out here has a lot more to do with predatory business practices and deceiving consumers and pushing, you know, growing and new craft breweries off of shelves and limiting our choices and consumers. And that's why we have a problem with it. It's not because we don't like Budweiser. I mean, I don't like Budweiser, but that's got nothing to do with it. You know.
Right.
So I don't know if this is the equivalent because I don't know that Fuller's behaves the same way in England that we're used to seeing here.
Well, based on what he made it sound like, no, they don't. This is more of a, it's a larger company buying a smaller one, not doing a predatory type of practice in a general sense, where he said that the Dark Star corporate board still runs all the pubs and whatnot.
Well,
which
we've
is something
heard
where a
that
lot of
here
the beer's
before,
going,
too.
Well, true, but you got to think, I mean,
Nothing's going to change. Beer will be the same. Let's have a bigger bank account, blah, blah,
I'm not
blah.
even sure if it's in the same concept range as far as here, where they're buying something just because it's part of the craft movement. There, it sounds more like a larger company buying a smaller company.
It does. You're right. And he said the big difference there, too, is that, over there they have what's called tied houses, which is where the brewery owns the pub, which we don't have that here. Tied, T-I-E-D, as in the pub is tied to the
that's
brewery.
where you went to drink.
To eat Tide Pods?
Tide Pods, yeah. It's an American thing.
Really, I think we need to have those here. I think we need to encourage people to eat Tide Pods here. I think it's Darwinism at its finest.
Yeah. It's like the whole cinnamon
Cascade
challenge.
Pods better.
Well, that too. We can have a whole pod like buffet.
Fruitier.
Really, yeah.
Flavor profile.
But
Causes much
they have
indigestion,
the
too.
Tide houses there where the breweries own the pubs, which
And
is
they wash
something
your
that
clothes.
we don't do here, and it's part of the 3-tier system. Is supposed to encourage competition and blah blah blah. It actually doesn't. It's actually the other way around. So it's a different dynamic over there. So I'll be interested to hear him talk about that. I don't think that they have the same type of situation we've got here, where the business practices are in my opinion, very, very
Truly predatory.
Yeah.
I think the reason they're buying those, man, is really just to kind of crush them. A lot of times, or at least that's the way it was in the '90s, anyway. So,
Yeah, who knows? I don't know that we really have a good grasp on exactly why they're doing what they're doing yet. It's
well, they've
Pretty
kind
far
of
above my head.
stopped actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
which means they have a plan. They didn't just decide to stop. That was their plan from the beginning. So.
Or because business isn't doing as well as they hoped it would at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I
they
mean,
might be close to the completion of the Death Star.
They're trying to stop Vader from taking over.
Right.
Yeah.
Their battle station is fully operational,
Right.
and they're ready to destroy planets.
I mean, just to skip ahead and on reference to
Uranus.
that, we have okay. So it's like Sam Adams recently put out a Northeast IPA. So here's somebody that's a larger brewery in America that's putting out a beer that everybody says really should be local, more or less. It's harder to get it out there in the market. There are very few people getting out in the national market because it's supposed to be so fresh and
Is that
But-
the reformulation of Rebel? Is that the same?
I don't know.
I thought I read that they reformulated Rebel to be a Northeast style or New England
Possibly.
The Rebel was kind of a tweener, really.
Could
If you
be.
think about it, it was on the way to that same idea where you were going down with the bitterness and more towards the flavor.
And it looked like a hazy, supposed to be filled with flavor type of beer.
Mm-hmm.
But and meanwhile, they also report that their shipments and whatnot are down nearly 8% in the fourth quarter of this past year.
Style.
So
Overall or for that product?
overall,
Okay.
overall. So that it's like here they are putting out a beer that's definitely sort of pandering to the market because that's what everybody says about Northeast IPAs right now. As far as any brewery that's open, everybody's going with that, especially here in Texas recently. And then you see that there's a lot of business that's a downturn as far as the national market goes. What they're putting out there. This is a company that has it's well established and has a large following. Yet they're putting out some beers and whatnot. They're definitely experimental for them. I would say that territory of something that fresh and not the usual range that they run in is putting something out there.
Here's two things I would say about that. One of them is shipments are down. That doesn't say anything about their bottom line or their profits or anything like that. So shipments being down 8%, who knows how that affects the bottom line or what their business is actually doing. The other thing you got to remember about Sam Adams is that when you've heard in the past years about their explosive growth and that kind of thing, Angry Orchard has been accounted for most of that. The cider side of things has been booming in the industry, and it could just be the leveling off of cider that could do that too.
Could be.
So it's tough to look at Sam Adams and draw too many conclusions, and especially that word shipments really stuck out to me. Like
it's just when you get across the board, I think that you're seeing a lot of the national larger breweries having issues with getting as much beer sold right now. Is probably a good reason that say the conglomerates the AB InBevs and whatnot maybe aren't doing what they were as strongly because of things like that, because they're
Well,
not going to take as much risk as they were when things were stronger in just the past year.
One of the
Yeah.
articles I read about Smutty Nose talked about some of these breweries are kind of victims of their own marketing, too, where their plan of going to market has been buy local or buy independent or buy
Right.
these kind of things, and then they get to a size where they're no longer
Local
the
or
local brewery.
independent.
They're no longer the independent brewery. They're a
Right.
big behemoth, and so all of these people that they've been programmed look for the small independent guys and support them. Well, they're doing it. Their branding worked.
Yeah.
And so now they're realizing, oh crap, now we're kind of on the other side of the fence.
Yep.
And that may be a big thing for Sam Adams.
I imagine it also has to do with problems of. I know we've noticed this on several occasions of bottles sitting on the shelf for more than 6 or 8 months, and so maybe they're hoping that if they drop off shipments a little bit, things won't sit on product shelves as long. They'll get rid of some of that
it
backlog
happen,
and
yeah.
get
like
fresher
that, yeah.
stuff back on the market again.
Yeah, that's a good point. Shipments again. That's one of that word shipment sticks out to me. It's not revenue. It's not profits.
Mm-hmm.
It's just shipments, and that can be cyclical. It could be an adjustment
True.
in the way
Yeah.
they go to distribution. All kinds of different things. So
Could be bad weather, keeping trucks off the road in
Yeah.
the middle of winter. And
that could affect it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the second point here that we've got, Yuengling sues AB InBev for blocking them from Mississippi. Accuses Anheuser-Busch and Mitchell Distributing of unlawful restraint of trade, wrongful interference with a contract, civil conspiracy, and attempting a monopoly and other violations of state law.
Say it ain't so.
What do you know?
As of
much the
2016.
details on this?
Basically, it sounded like they're just running through distributors, and that AB InBev called everybody in when Yuengling was trying to get into the state, saying, hey, come over to our side of things. Let's just keep them out as much as possible. And that's really where they're working towards that, the general concept of that. So,
Well, I know from the business I'm in, it's possible, especially when you're a big strong arm like AB InBev is. In my business, DeWalt would be the
Right.
equivalent. It's possible to go into places and say, hey, listen, if you don't carry that, we'll give you this and this.
Yeah,
We'll
and
give
that's
you
what's
extra
happening.
dating,
And
we'll
the-
give you extra discounts.
which
that
is
kind
always happening.
of- right.
I mean, that's always what the game is as far as they go. So,
Which is technically not legal.
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
It's, but it does go on, and that's one of the things we're talking about when we're trying to compare the Fuller's thing to what we see over here with AB InBev and that kind of thing. That's the type of behavior
That's different, I think.
that's different. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
so
and
if
there's
this
just
suit was filed in 2016, is it still in process, or has it been
Apparently.
resolved yet? Or
Sounds like it's still in process. Based on what I was reading today, what Nigel sent us for this, it sounds like it's still in process.
I saw a story pop up about it recently, so I think it might have made it through a certain step in the process where now it's actually on a court's docket. I think that's what it is.
Yuengling is in Mississippi. However, I think there was a lot of issues with the distributors that were in question. That was the main thing with this. And then there came down to things of selling the distribution, the companies that were involved, and the people trying to do it just came down to a lot of different tied up versions of the usual BS that goes with distribution of beer in states. So
I wish Yuengling was in Texas, personally.
I mean,
I would
it's
buy
it's
so
good,
much of that beer.
It's good beer.
That would be like Modelo is to Austin. That's what Yuengling would be at my house. There would always be a case of it.
It's
there.
funny because we say that about a lot of beers, and then it comes here, and then we don't drink them.
Right, exactly.
Well, as a whole, as consumers as a whole, but I guarantee you, I'd be buying Yuengling. That would be my house light beer.
There
to
was
have
so many
on.
beers that people were like, "Oh, I mean, it was like, look at what I've got."
Yeah.
It's like this prized possession. And
Yeah.
then it comes in, and I think I've bought it maybe twice.
There are breweries that I'm guilty of that's for sure. Yuengling is not one of them.
Like,
I drink Yuengling.
They make
every
good
chance
beer.
I get.
Like,
Every time I've had it out
what
east,
is it, Shrinker Law. I know when that came into town, everybody's like, and then I can't say I had it maybe once or twice since it's come into.
Oh, really? I bought it a bunch
Texas.
of times. I like
Right.
it.
Okay.
A little bit of Schlenkerlar goes a long way, though. That's
Yes,
the
it
thing about
does.
it.
Even
Yeah,
in
it does.
Bamberg. After about 2 of them, I was okay. Let's go get a Pils.
So, and then the last one here, Ballast Point is opening a brewery or tap room in the Disneyland Resort. I
That's
don't know.
just because
That seems about right to me.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Was the fact of the concept of them actually opening a brewery within Disneyland. I was like, okay, well, that's the next step for you guys, right?
Well, they are the Disneyland of beers, really, right? I mean,
At this
twice
stage-
as much. They cost twice as much as they should.
Yes, exactly.
And it's all about.
And I'd rather, if you're having to spend the kind of money that they already cost, and you're going to spend the money that costs to buy a beer at something like Disneyland, I'd rather have a Ballast Point than, Coors Light, Miller Light,
Absolutely.
Bud Light.
So we're actually
Well, I bet you it's not Coors Light or Miller Light prices at Disneyland. I
No
bet you're
kidding,
paying
man.
$15
It's still going to be,
for.
well, I know, but
Hey, man.
you're already spending that much for
I did
a beer
beers
there.
around the world at the Epcot Center a couple times, and man, I think it cost me a couple $100.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I mean,
yeah.
but I don't remember much past Germany. I'm just saying. After a liter of Doppelbock, that does that to you.
A liter of Doppelbock. How long did that take you to drink?
I don't know, but
Is there
I don't remember.
Is there any other way to serve a Doppelbock?
Liter, yeah. They had Spaten Optimator in a liter.
Whew, man.
Yeah. So anyway,
crowning.
speaking of one of those beers that
Ooh.
I couldn't wait till I got to Texas was this Innocent Gun. It's a
That's
Scottish
really
beer.
good.
And all of their beers are every single one of them are barrel aged. They just put them in different barrels.
It's a very light barrel aged
Yeah,
flavor.
it
Way
doesn't-
better than that Bellhaven.
Yeah.
Yes, that's for sure.
that was a brown
But,
Bellhaven.
Whoever
too.
brought that's a real dick.
Just be glad we don't have Scottish people, because I think if we had a guy that was from Scotland and Nigel in the same episode, I think they would actually fight.
Probably be, but
I'd
because
love to
Scottish beer
hear
is
the
supposed to be
shit talking
skunked.
beforehand. Because
There'd
I
be
know it would be words, but I don't know that we'd be able to understand any of
There'd
them.
be a whole lot of words before there was any throwing down. That's just the way that they roll. The English and
You've got a
Scottish.
vanilla vagina. That's right. I was specifically told never to say that again, right? That's right. Never mind. All right. We'll move on. All right. So beer work we did
another.
this week.
Yeah, just general. Anybody do anything?
I did.
I spent today. I actually transferred a bunch of stuff to secondary, and then tested a bunch of beers I brewed last week just to see where they were at. So
So you
spent
brew
about
like
3
4
hours.
beers at a time, though, right? I mean, you don't never just brew
At least
a beer,
2
right?
most of the time.
Yeah. So you have a lot of like transfer and stuff like that to do at one
I've
time
got-
when you have to do it.
I transferred a mead. I tested 2 beers. I dry hopped one of those, and I tested 2 other beers to see where they were, and they're a little short of a week, so they're still a little less than attenuated. So
I haven't brewed in a while.
Oh, and I kegged a beer, and I cleaned some stuff, and I bottled a gallon batch I made of a barley wine, just effing around. So.
I looked at my fermenter at least 4 times this week. And it's sitting in my pub. I looked over it and thought, wow, that's still pretty cloudy.
I looked at a lot of grain and a lot of hops this
Yeah.
week. Some yeast,
I was going to
Move
brew,
some sacks of grain around.
but it was 32 degrees or something and raining. And I
And you
thought,
still
can't
have-
brew
I've-
inside.
Sack of grain waiting to be brewed. It's almost coming on 2 weeks now. It sucks. So
I transferred my experimental smoke beer over to secondary and tasted it. It's
and
coming along quite nicely. It's definitely a different smoke flavor than like the.
what's experimental about it?
I took
Smoked it
the
with dung.
I took Stubby's barbecue blonde recipe and I used more smoked malt and a different smoked malt than is in the recipe. The recipe calls for 2 pounds of cherry wood, and I used 2.5 pounds of the Erex smoked, which is a different smoke flavor. And then I had a half pound of the cherry wood on top of that, and I bumped the base grain by 1 pound.
I'll be interested to taste that because that Eric's smoke smells really good.
It does, and this one comes out a little bit closer to like a pipe tobacco smoke than it does like barbecue smoke.
nice.
Well, it's weird because we actually have a Roush beer that we made with it.
Yeah.
And it's been in there lagering for like 10, 12 weeks. We need a
Well, we'll compare the lager versus the ale when they're ready.
At what point does it go from lagering to getting old?
That's a good
To
question.
oops.
10 or 12 weeks?
Yeah,
maybe?
probably.
You're right in the 10 to 12 week range, yeah.
The sweet spot.
Well,
It
I
may
mean,
be longer than that. It may be like 3 months. So.
It depends on which vessel it's in because it's not getting old if you're cellaring it.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about that tonight. So we got some really old beers, so we're going to see how they hold up. But no, I didn't brew anything or anything. So anyway.
With all that
It's like-
time you have. Oh, there it is.
Man.
Wow.
I
The
used to-
soundboard is in effect tonight.
I actually I helped a lot of people brew, I guess, by giving them ingredients and stuff. But you know,
Yeah, even when you don't brew, you probably still do more brewing related anything than most people.
yeah, I do sometimes.
I see a teardrop.
Spreading the gospel.
Okay. Anyway, is it time for
Yeah,
just
speaking
the
of the advice.
The tip and just the tip.
just the tip? Party foul, I guess. All right. So here is I think this is a really good tip, and I think this works well for extract brewers, but even all grain brewers is I think most of the time, and I've seen this a lot when I go and brew with people a lot of times, especially people, and I think I encourage everybody to go out and really do, you know, to brew with other people just to kind of see their techniques and how they're brewing. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people don't, these little nuances you may or may not, know about until you actually go out and start brewing with other people. And for one thing is your burner and how much, if you're using a turkey fryer or something of that nature,
Or the large banjo burners that you
large
sell.
banjo
Those in
burners.
particular.
But I think a lot of times people think they have to boil the crap out of beer, and that's just not the case.
You can
And-
leave some crap in.
Yeah, and I mean I've gone and brewed with some people, and I'm like, man, what's your boil off, like 2 gallons an hour? I mean, so I think a lot of times people don't realize that you don't have to boil the hell out of it. I mean, so. And I think one of the big problems is, especially with extract brewing, is when you are boiling so hard that you can caramelize sugar. Well, you can do that with all grain too. So, and what happens? You guys heard me talk about this a million times. What happens when you caramelize sugar? Well, you get a darker beer than you want and a sweeter beer than you want. So, and I think that's really common with extract brewing. So.
There are a few styles though that do benefit from a more aggressive boil.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You do it
Well,
when you
if you're
need
doing
to
one of the
intentionally. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, but not, your Pilsner or your Blonde or your Pale Ale, your American Pale Ale don't need to
Right.
be
IPAs.
super hyper boiled. But yeah, like darker beers and Scotch ales and,
Yep.
and that
Imperial
kind of
stouts or
thing.
something
Yeah.
like that.
Well, in the beer that we brought tonight to try our Belgian quad, we pull off a first running of the wort and start that to boil, stop the transfer for a while, and then really allow that.
I love doing that.
First part of the wort to get a good caramelization before we transfer.
I've
the
not heard
rest.
anybody doing it on a quad. That's interesting. I've done that with Scotch ales before and always been real happy with the results.
The problem a lot of times when you do that, however, people, if you're entering in competition, a lot of times people perceive that as diacetyl.
Yeah, it can get a,
because
it
they
get a
get
light
that caramel.
butterscotch flavor to
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
And
But I don't care about those people.
I know you've experienced that.
Yeah,
in judging, because I mean, what do you used to do that, right, with your
Yeah,
Scotch
yeah.
ale?
I'll do a Scotch ale and do that. And you're right; it can give it a light butterscotch note to it, and it could be mistaken for diacetyl.
And I
That's
think
why
a
I
lot
would
of people-
never do that with a beer I was putting in competition.
Right on.
But that same style of beer, if I was putting in competition, I'd probably have to put peat malt in it too. So I just wouldn't do it.
But that approach is very appropriate for when you get higher up the scale in the Scotch ales, especially in the wee heavy. Getting that really heavy caramelization in the beer, I think, is a real key to hitting the appropriate flavor profile.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Well, there you go.
I think it's
That's-
fun too. It's an
Yeah.
enjoyable brew day.
That's just the tip.
Just
I was just trying to look that. I was looking
with
up
Stubby.
that
Just the tip.
Wow, that was really
earlier
good.
this week. I was that whole process of taking the first portion of that and boiling it heavy to make a wee heavy. I was trying to understand how you did that earlier this week because it was featured on one of the Zimmergy emails this week.
When I've done it before, I've used a separate pot. So I'll take, if it's a 10-gallon batch, I'll take the first 2 gallons, or a 5-gallon, I'll take the first gallon, and I put it in a separate pot, and then I continue my lauter. And while I'm lautering and heating up my regular boil, I'll boil that off to the side, and I boil it down to a syrup. Like it's real thick by the time it's done. And I'll tell you this, you have to be very careful I don't know on a pro level, but on a homebrew level, when it gets thick like that, you can have 1 gallon in the bottom of an 8-gallon kettle and it'll boil over.
Yeah.
And so, because it turns into candy almost, and it really will
Crystallizes.
Yeah. So you do have to watch it carefully, stir it a lot. You want to make sure it doesn't burn on the
yeah,
bottom.
I was about to say, you gotta be
you don't
careful
want
with
to
that.
scorch it. You are just trying to caramelize it. So there.
Although again, for the Scotch style, some of those burn notes can contribute to the peaty flavor that you're looking for as well.
Yeah, I think you're better off if you want to get that to heat your kettle hot and then run into it and let it sizzle a little bit as it runs in. I think it's very difficult when you're boiling it down.
Hard to manage
to do. Yeah, it's hard to manage. It'll get out of hand quickly. So,
All right, so this beer here is an interesting beer. I love this beer.
Beautifully wrapped.
Yeah, I saw it.
This
And I
is
was
called
like,
beer in
wow.
a bag.
Did you get that for Valentine's Day?
ooh, look, it's just the tip.
But it's a 2009 Aventinus, and if you read it,
Is it the Icebox?
no, this is just a regular Aventinus, I think.
Weizenbach?
Yeah, Weizenbach.
Oh, okay.
And this one was brewed in 2009, and it says that they actually decided in '99 that they were going to start aging 240 cases each year in their historical ice cellar. So
Oh, okay. I think Eric wants to make sure that he gets some. He was gesturing,
Yeah.
He blew the dust out of his
gesticulating
glass.
Is that why you ran for a clean glass?
oh yeah. Oh, you didn't get any of this either, did you?
he's in the no beer zone.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, I want to make sure I get a little
We
bit
need
too.
we need a window.
Yeah,
to
we need
pass
a
stuff
little,
through.
yeah,
beer
little
pass
window.
through.
Yeah. But anyway,
With a flap.
Yeah.
I had this in Germany my last trip, and fresh at the source. So I'm sure
Oh,
I'm going to
nice.
be. I'm sure I'm going to be extremely disappointed. But
Yeah, well, see, the Aventinus is the Aventini. The Aventinus I've had in the past have been hit and miss because I think some of them are too old when you get them.
it's
So
got like a crusty thing around the outside here.
That's a good thing, I think, right?
she's been sent in to get beer for him. Right here. So this is really good radio when we're pouring beer and no one's talking. It's very interesting for us. but
Shall we
not to
move
anybody
on
else.
to the next
Yeah.
segment?
Yeah,
Yes.
so unsolicited
Thank you.
answers to internet questions about beer. This is this segment I think is a really good one because it's just an endless treasure trove of content for us.
Yeah,
and
you're
I
right
think
about that.
what it reminds me of as we go look for these questions on the internet are to get back to some basic things sometimes that we overlook and we don't think about, but there are still some things out there that people need to be reminded of as they're starting their brewing journey, and that's what we're going to kind of get to. They're nice, quick little snippets that we don't have to spend a whole episode on, but it's good to remind people at little points in their process because I think we all have weaknesses, and we've talked about it before. We all get hung up on that brew day, the hot side stuff, but the bottling or the fermentation or preparing for the brew day or whatever
Minor
we all-
details.
We have little
The minor details.
Yeah, we tend to overlook things that are actually really important. So
Things we already have down pat.
sorry, I'm taking too long.
Yeah.
at the bottom
So
here.
anyway, I'm actually quite surprised at how good this is. It's not oxidized at all. So you think about it. That's what 8 years old. So.
Oh, that's really nice, actually.
Yeah, it's not really oxidized. They says that they keep it in their ice cellar for 3 years. So I don't know. Anyway,
It's got some notes of oxidation to it, but they're not real strong. It's
Right.
a kind of onset of oxidation that you like to have.
yeah,
something
actually,
like
I
that.
think it actually improves the flavors.
Yeah. So our first one is quick question for those more knowledgeable than I just received a pack of Y Yeast 1764, the Pac-Man yeast, with a production date of 9/20/2017. According to the pitch rate calculator on Brewer's Friend, I have an estimated 0% viability. The pack is slightly swollen and puffy, and I'm brewing on Saturday, and I was planning on a 1-liter starter. Am I hosed here? Will it be enough? I had to order online as the strain is not available locally, and now I'm worried I won't be able to pitch when I want. Any guidance is greatly appreciated.
Okay, well, I would say for the first thing is there's only one distributor that carries this. You cannot order this directly from Y Yeast. So me as a
This particular, the Pac-Man
yeah,
yeast?
the Pac-Man
Yeah.
yeast, you
Okay.
cannot. We don't have it most of the time, and the reason being is the only place we can get it is out of Washington, and by the time it gets here, it's old. So part of that problem, part of this thing is that particular yeast strain is difficult to get because only Brewcraft out of Washington is the one that distributes.
I've wondered about that. You don't see it very often.
And that's also, if you'll notice, if you do find it, it's more expensive than your typical Y yeast.
So there's a couple of question marks there then, being that it's not coming directly from Y yeast, it's coming through a distributor like that. You don't know how it was handled. The nice thing is that it's really during the cool part of the year since it was produced, so even if it was spent some time in shipping or in warehouses, there's a good chance it spent it cool. But the one thing that we found when we took Y yeast packs and had them analyzed in a lab and all that stuff is that, for one thing, the cell count was a lot higher than what they said it was going to be. The other thing was that the cell count and the viability remained much, much higher than what these yeast calculators told us they were going to be.
However, I think you got to look at this one too, because the strain that we tested was highly
1056, right? Yeah.
So it's used a lot, and they go through a whole lot of yeast. So,
but I don't know why that would matter though.
I do, because I know
production.
They don't produce. They don't produce.
Often.
They're not pulling off. Some weird strain.
But if they take
week.
it from a slant and they produce it on a date, isn't that the same as any other yeast that's taken from a slant and produced on a date?
Maybe.
I mean, maybe there'd be some viability differences between strains, but I don't know why volume would make a difference.
Because I think you would have more of a healthy yeast that's always going all the time. It's like almost like a Solera.
It's worked up, worked up and ready to go
At
out
that
the door.
point.
But you
thing
think
is-
Pac-Man would actually be one of those because it is a popular one. It's just
Commercially,
very
right?
limited to get for home brewing and whatnot.
Yeah, I think commercially it's used quite a bit.
Yeah,
isn't it?
I see Pac-Man reference all the
It's
time.
Rogue's
Yeah.
house strain.
Exactly.
So the other thing is here is he says his pack is slightly swollen and puffy. That's a good sign.
Right.
Actually, I mean, I think we're missing the obvious point here. Swollen and puffy, you probably need to cancel brew day, go to an emergency room, and get a penicillin.
That's a good point.
A different pack.
Not the package.
Nice.
This recording of Cumberland Radio was filmed in front of a live studio audience.
No, and this is one thing. We get quite a concern about this, and there are some strains that off gas more. 1056 being one of those.
Yeah.
If you read Y Yeast website, it says don't worry about the big swollen.
No, I think it's a good sign, personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So my answer to this guy would be, if he walked in the shop and asked me this, my answer would be, if you were planning a 1 liter starter, I'd do a 2 liter starter.
Right.
or 5 or
Zero
10.
viability is
Just
wrong.
do, yeah, it's not
wrong
zero
for
viability.
this one.
Yeah.
And that's what I think a lot of times the calculators are putting out. And again, you're talking about a 5-month stretch for this as far as this post went and the timing of what he had. So it's a 5-month stretch. I mean, here we're saying 6 months is usually our limit, and even then, there's still viability in those packs. You just have to build a bigger
And then,
starter
I've had
and
some
maybe
that are
more than
5
one.
I've had some that are 5 months old and completely dead. So.
Right.
The other part of that answer, too, would be, what are you brewing with it, too? If he's doing a double or a triple IPA, I don't know, man. I
would think
do
that
2
typically
packs and a starter, personally.
There's going to be, if you're going to spend the time and you really want that yeast and you have a hard time getting it, you're probably going to get enough viable cells to get started somewhere, even if you make the smallest starter to begin and you keep building off of that. Eventually you're going to get there, So there you go. That's really the key to that.
Okay, so the next one is a guy that wants to split a 1 liter starter to save money and not have to buy a larger flask. Says, hello guys, I'm interested in saving money by overbuilding yeast starters and have a few questions before I start. Before I start, it had an exclamation point. I currently have a 1 liter Erlenmeyer flask. The plan is to make a 1 liter starter, save 500 milliliters in a jar, and use the other half to make up a 1 liter starter. Is this a good practice? In my readings, I see a lot about people using stir plates while making their starters. Is this a requirement, or can I make my starter in my flask and leave it at room temperature in a dark place for 24 to 36 hours without stirring it? So really, there's 2 questions there.
Yeah, there are. And he was corrected in the area this was asked, but yeah, I think starting with the second question, the easy one, is that a stir plate and putting it off of the stir plate are not the same thing.
Not even close.
You will not have anywhere near the same turnout if you're just swirling it now and then. It's good. It makes a difference, and it will give you more yeast, but they will not be the same thing as if you have a stir plate.
The first thing I would say is take that 1 liter, flask and throw it in the
Throw
trash.
it away. Yeah.
Get a bigger one.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you can't even boil 1 liter of starter in a freaking 1 liter
Right.
flask. I'm sorry, you're going to have that shit all over your.
And that's what
Yeah.
I think they have even
So-
referenced that in the answers to this question. It's like, don't do that. And the guy got it like a discount or something, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
Well, and this is one of the things I hate is this super penny pinching attitude that some homebrewers have, and where can I
Some?
save every last little dollar? Well, most people I know don't actually do that kind of stuff. I mean, nobody in this room
Well,
is like, how can I get 2 batches out of one?
and days
pack of
gone
these,
by,
and I don't want to buy a stir plate and all that. At some point you have to just realize
it's a hobby, man.
to get things done, you have to have certain things.
yeah.
I mean, there are some limitations. I know there's people out there that can't afford stuff, right?
But if you're going to pinch pennies and save every little dollar you can here and there, don't do it on yeast.
Yeah, I agree.
And
with
don't
that.
do it
start
on your
small and
yeast.
build bigger
Yeah,
for a lot of things either.
That's the one area where you should be making sure that you're doing everything you can for
Or
it to
just
be
buy
right.
dry yeast.
Just buy dry.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is
there you
my
go.
answer to that actually. But
That's the easiest answer.
so if you're going to try and take a pack of yeast, make up a starter, split it in 2, and use it in another batch, make sure you have the right equipment to do it. You're going to have to spend money to save money on this one, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get a
Although,
5-liter starter.
Kind of a counterpoint to that, though. I have a good buddy, a homebrew friend of mine, who does this on a regular basis. He grows up several different strains, makes multiple starters, does it very successfully, and he makes really great beer. And he's really,
Does he do it without a stir plate?
He does use a stir plate.
Okay.
I think
See,
that's
that's what I'm talking about.
part
If
of
you
the
do
answer
want
to
to
this
do
question.
it,
You're
get
going
the
to have
right
more
size
success
flask. Yeah.
making multiple starters out of one yeast pack using a stir plate, because you're going to grow
Right.
up a bigger culture. And but yeah, I mean, it can be done. It takes some work. I know that he's basically taken over an entire bathroom in his house so that no one else is allowed to use. But he does it, and he does it successfully. And
you can do it, and you can do it successfully. Now, if you take a pack of yeast and you get a couple stir plates and or one stir plate, and you split this up and all that, and you're totally successful at it, you've now saved yourself $4 on a batch of beer.
More or less.
To me,
Well,
but I think he started the process more as a time saver. He could
so that he had yeast ready to go
Right.
when
he could. I'm going to brew tomorrow. I've got my starter already in a jar, ready to go. And
and see, to me,
well,
that's a good reason
right,
to do
Yeah.
it.
But here's something, a little caveat that I'm going to throw into the mix here is that, and I think this is something to think about if you are doing something like this, is the normal growth phase, a progression of when and where you want to pitch your starter.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have some yeast and you want to spin it up, you want to do that 18 to 24 hours before you pitch, because that's when your yeast is, you have the lag phase and your growth phase. The growth phase is 18 to 24 hours. So that's ideally when you want to pitch your starter, is the 18 to 24 hours of when you start it up and you're feeding it, right?
Yep.
So that way,
It's in phase. We
it's
talked
in
about that
phase,
with
because
Nick. Yeah.
because you want, when you pitch it, you want it to actually continue to grow through the next 18 to 24 hours.
Right.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, about oxygenation after the fact, after your 18 to 24 hours too. So,
So basically what you're doing is taking one pack of yeast and making it into 2. And then now you're going to have to make starters for those 2 packets of yeast that you
Right.
made, pretty
Exactly,
much.
yeah.
Yeah. So that what you're doing is you're just cutting your liquid yeast cost to about the cost of dry yeast.
Well, you have to start. You have to start looking at
plus your free labor.
If you're
Right,
looking at,
exactly.
if you're starting to look at DME, I mean, man, it gets expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, a pack of DME is what, $4 or $5, So I mean, that's what a package of DME is. What you got 16 ounces, and you're going to use about 3 ounces per liter. So if you're doing a big starter, you're almost going to be in $5 for a 4 or 5 liter starter.
And when I talk about, I hate to see people pinch pennies and stuff like this. Normally, a guy like this that's talking about, I want to split this pack of yeast and I don't have a stir plate. Is that okay? What you end up finding out if you talk to some people like this more is, oh, and I'm going to use a mason jar. Oh, and I'm just going to crumple up some newspaper and stuff it in the top. And every chance they get to cut a corner, they do it. And when it comes to yeast, if you want to split up your yeast packs and stuff like that, that's fine. If you've got the time and the space and all that to do it. But I don't think that you can really save yourself money doing
and that
if
may
you
or may
work
not
out
be.
all the math at the
Here's
end
something
of it, all
that
the
you have
time
to
you have to put
consider
into it and
too. Here's
everything.
something to consider. Like we were talking earlier about the guy that's doing multiple generations. Well, you also have to think too. That's why a lot of these laboratories will slant these things and then come back and regrow these up from a slant, and the reason being is because mutation.
Yeah.
So they start to change over time. So what the yeast companies do is they'll actually take a sample, put it on a slant, and put it in the refrigerator to keep it and preserve it, and then grow it up directly from that. So that gives you kind of an idea, of how things are going to evolve. I mean, because they can change, and as a matter of fact, from what I understand, what a lot of people will say is that in a homebrew setting, you probably shouldn't run more than 4 gens on a yeast, because you have a lot more mutation in a smaller amount. Since you like in a brewery, you could go a lot longer than that.
Yeah,
and you also have
even there. I've heard typically 10 is about maximum.
I know some that go a lot longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, if you talk,
we did that experiment this summer. I don't know if you remember me telling you about that. Where on our Kolsch we were just repitching, and after about 6 batches, it started getting really sideways.
Weird.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting and good weird, but not something I could ever reproduce, right? So
I remember. I think you gave me one of those, and it was kind of like tart.
Yeah.
Almost like maybe a little cidery.
Exactly.
Maybe. It was kind of weird. Yeah, but and typically the problem that I've had with repitching yeast, and we talked about that. We can go way back to some of that, and you re-listen to some of the episodes. But we talking about washing yeast and repitching on the yeast cake and all of that good stuff. But those are. But anyway, I think that's a good topic of conversation. So, but I would say ultimately
use dry yeast.
Use dry yeast, and if you're not going to use dry yeast, make sure that you do the proper starters, and throw that 1 liter flask away.
Can I ask a newbie question?
It's great to drink
Newbie
beer
question.
Drink beer out of it.
What's a slant?
A slant basically is like it looks like a little test tube, and it's got a little bit of auger on it, and then they just spread it on there, grow it up, and then they preserve it.
It's how they do it in the deep freeze when they keep the samples in freeze, and what they take from that to grow up.
The newer, fresh.
And if you look at a cross section of the tube, the auger is like that.
Sideways, yeah.
Okay. I've heard the term said a lot in a lot of different things, and I've inferred what it means, but I had never actually seen a definition for it in any of the stuff I've ever read.
It's kind of like a small...
My grandpa was in Vietnam, and it meant something totally different.
Yeah, that's a totally different topic, and that's what gets us banned from certain outlets. Thank you, Brandon.
Oh, man.
Are we going to have to re-record this again?
Sorry.
It's okay, we'll just cut this
Brandon.
from the actual
I
recorded
feel like
section.
I made it a long time this time.
Man.
All right.
So
the last one,
basically they're mini Petri dishes.
Okay.
I guess is the best way to say it. Yeah.
so the last one here is probably one that Stubby could answer pretty well because he's built so many of these. Attaching a collar to a chest freezer. Use caulk or window foam edging for sealing between collar and freezer, ? Is it always a good idea to apply some caulk on the outside and inside seam where the wood meets the freezer? Does the wood have to be treated in any way, stain or polyurethane? I'm also going to insulate the collar with foam board and silver foil ductwork tape to cover all the seams and ends. USB computer fan for air circulation too.
Who was laughing at that one?
For building the actual collar, are screws enough, or should I use wood glue too? Is it necessary to prime a freezer before painting it with chalkboard paint? There's a lot of questions.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
It's
Well,
a practical answer one on this one.
Yeah,
so.
and I'm going to say it real easy.
Do you want to just email him an answer?
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, really, you're way overdoing it. I mean, it doesn't require all of that. I mean, build the collar. You can build it out of. I build mine out of 2x6s. Use some tub surround, adhesive. Glue it on there, and there you go. You're good to go. You might want to. I mean, I would paint it maybe.
Paint it or stain it.
Paint it or
Yeah, maybe
stain it
some
or
polyurethane.
polyurethane. But I don't think you have to get too busy about all that other stuff. Man, 2x6. It seems to keep cool, and that's enough.
The
Depending on
insulation
where
seemed
it's
like a
at.
bit much to me, and a USB computer fan for air circulation. I mean,
Right.
It's a freezer. You're doing a fourth of the work it's meant to.
And
do.
where are you? Where you have this
the
thing
only
too,
thing I
you
could
know?
say with the maybe the air circulation, but it really wouldn't work the same as like in a refrigerator. The reason there's a fan there is because it blows the cold air from the top down to the bottom,
Right.
But you also have a way to get rid of the condensation, but we don't have that availability. When you make a chest freezer into a refrigerator, you're always going to have some condensation problems. There's just no way to get rid of it.
I know this doesn't make sense, but those little USB fans really do make a difference. I've got one in all of my chest fermenters.
Really? Okay.
And you hold your hand up to it, and you can't even feel it blowing. But I swear, and it just may be me imagining it, but I swear it makes a difference since I put those things in before I had them. So
on
Okay.
the
All right.
humidity or the temperature difference, or
just keeping the
Temperature
air
probably more.
circulating because like a
We
lot
probably
of
have
those,
cold
a lot of
and
those devices,
warm spot.
Right.
yeah, exactly.
It's all
It-
around the
it keeps
edges,
the
so-
temperature more uniform within the device.
I know
I
they
will
all
say
work
this
differently.
though: and people worry about those collars. I've taken the lids off of those things and redone them. Man, if you saw what the lid was, it's a little piece of crappy fiberglass insulation.
Yeah.
It's not even closed cell foam insulation. So I can guarantee you a 2x4 or 2x6 is probably more insulation than what that
More density.
more
Absolutely.
density than what the roof of the damn cooler is. So.
And you know, if you have this out in a garage and you live in the desert, that's some time to start worrying about what more of that.
At
what
that point,
is,
you would probably want to re-insulate the lid.
Yeah, I mean, even in Texas summer, without having a collar on mine, they do a great job. I've always had one out in the garage for years.
Well, they're meant to be in deep freeze, and you're telling them to go to 34 degrees.
Yeah.
It's
You know, they'll rust depending on what model you get. Just make sure you get one that's got a decent inside liner. That's really the key to that. You know, there are some liners that definitely rust faster than others.
You know,
so.
I know a guy that what he does is he fills his up with water the night before and turns it on, and then he has a sump pump that he runs it.
I'm shocked that it'll hold water like
Right.
that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, why wouldn't it?
It'll hold a lot of
Because it's not
hold a
meant
lot
to.
of,
It just takes a little bit of a seam. Those seams aren't made to be water.
well, whole kegs can pour out there and have
I
a
was
nice
about to say,
few
next time
inches.
you
You
have
know,
to bail out a keg that leaked its entire
Well, that's a
contents
couple
into-
inches in the bottom. An entire thing full. How many
Yeah.
gallons do you think that is? 100,
I don't know.
150 gallons?
Well, depends on what
7.2 to
size it
9
is.
cubic feet.
Yeah, I mean,
if it's a 5 cubic foot one, it's not that much.
So he freezes it solid? Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
it doesn't get frozen by the time the next day. It would take a long time.
oh yeah.
Is he
That,
using
now
as his
that
cold
would be
liquor tank?
cool.
Yeah, cold liquor tank.
Oh, all right. I got
Okay.
That
he's
would be
just
cool
using
to make a giant ice cube.
Y'all just
I'm on
come chip
board with
away
that.
at this. It's cool. Here's some
That
pics.
seems like a lot of trouble, though.
Got to stick a stick in it.
Pull it out.
Yeah, giant like popsicle. Yeah.
Anyway, practical advice on those things is, you know, it's not as hard as it sounds most of the
I
time.
think-
It's
I
just
think-
the effort to put into it half the time.
I think
so.
a lot of the time, I think the biggest problem with a lot of home brewing or home brewers is that they overcomplicate their lives when it doesn't have to be. You know, it's
Part of the fun, though.
yeah,
Yeah,
It is a
and
toy.
It
It's
is
not
a toy.
rocket science
But
unless
perfect,
you want
a
it to
perfect
be.
example is Matt Westlake. He God love him. You know, he
He
wears
enjoys
weird clothes.
that just as much as he does brewing.
Yeah, maybe so. He does that. He doesn't brew all that much. He just builds crap. He's like, oh, I want to build this whirlpool and this
Yeah, I
and
think
that.
he does that more than he brews, actually.
It's it's the tool. It's a toy to play with. And I've seen some really crazy coolers that people do for their kegs.
Yeah.
I mean, people build the whole coffin thing around everything. That's a piece of furniture in the house.
Hell, I mean,
It's
Mike
all
Treadway
wood
has
and
a really
yeah,
nice
it's
one, yeah.
amazing work, you know. And
I
it's
saw
just
somewhere this guy built a damn kegerator out of a trash can. I mean,
weighs like
you know.
500 pounds.
Hey,
you know.
hey.
That's the camperator, right?
That's the camperator, and it is very successful, sir. I took 3 kegs. It was 1 wine, 1 cider, 1 beer, and they stayed cold for 4 days. Okay.
Wow, I think you hit a nerve, dude.
I know, evidently.
Oh, we got the slow clap going
Yes.
for the
All right,
camperator.
I'll just shut up now. Thanks.
All right, so what do we got next here?
Well,
we
it
don't
says,
we don't have any beer.
That's
Yeah.
true. We
Yeah,
are
I was
low on the
thirsty
beer.
out here.
Although, you know what? That Aventinus was really good.
Yeah,
I was
Very good,
surprised.
yeah.
I was shocked.
Mine was a little chunky, but you know.
I use a little more in the glass.
Maybe we should have rolled it in.
Was
the
it ham?
suspension.
Yes.
You shouldn't have poured it in your ham glass.
So should we do the food and beer pairing discussion with?
I only put this
Before
in
this?
just for the fact that y'all are here, and
Yeah,
if there was
let's do
something to
that.
add into on this,
Or is it break
or
time?
should this be a whole topic on its own? Y'all come back and we
Well,
talk
I-
about barbecue.
I
and
feel like
beer
that's a
and
rabbit hole.
Beer into barbecue, and
I think it's an excellent topic, and to be quite honest with you, I'd love to talk about it. But my partner, who Jordy, who heads up the food portion of our operation, I think it would be great to have him here to
Yeah,
talk
and
more
maybe
about
bring
that.
us some of it so we can sample it. and-
Absolutely, I was thinking
and,
the same
and
thing.
taste it along with the beer.
Right.
You know, once you guys
all
get up
right.
and
And
open
we're
up.
gonna do that at
And
some
I
point
can,
with y'all.
I can tell you that we definitely are working on some things that will incorporate our beer into the menu. Yeah, I think it would be much more informative to have Jordy here talking about that because he's the expert on the food side, and I'm just kind of guessing.
Sounds fine, man. I just put it in there because you're here tonight.
No,
we
I
didn't
saw
talk
that.
about it last
I just saw that.
time,
I'm like,
so-
oh god, thanks for the heads up.
All right, awesome. Well, let's take a quick break, maybe 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll start a main topic of discussion.
Belgian
of
Dark Strong.
and we'll bring them
Yeah.
out, and that's when it's going to get stupid. Yeah. We'll be right back.
Not as stupid as it was.
Less
Thank
stupid.
God.
That's our goal. Less stupid.
Music side. Turn on the AC.
Brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. Turned up, bitch, I'm lost in the sauce. Turned up, bitch, I'm lost in the sauce. Brewed up. I'm 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 brewed up. Turned up, bitch, I'm lost in the sauce. Turned up, bitch, I'm lost in the sauce. Bitch, I'm the man when I crack a can like Stone Cold, use both hands. Living right through that chug life. Crab brew is what I like. IPAs, that's all day. So strong, that shit cray. Rap shows and collect pay. Living fast, that's my way. Southside, that's my stay. Yo, chick, that's my aim. Shotty bees and brew teas. Vans on, that's my way. More hops like Jordan. To the Bud Light, y'all so plain. I'm so fly like so plain. Daniel son, my kicks train. Y'all slow, better move lanes. I can't blame cause you so lame. Straight flex with no strain. Making plays with this no game. Yeah, you like beer, but we not the same. I don't trap and I don't bang. Chug beers to go insane. Lost again and that's off, man. Doing what I wanna while you doing what you gotta. If it ain't that crab brew, then you ain't drinking proper. Getting cream by all means. Chasing dreams, stay in me. Just pass me a drink and just let me be. Brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. Turned up, bitch, I'm lost in the sauce. Turned up, bitch, I'm lost in the sauce. Brewed up. I'm 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 brewed up. Turned up, bitch, I'm lost in the sauce. Turned up, bitch, I'm lost in the sauce. Round two, that's more brew. Grab a case and roll through. Got the green roll too. Bad chicks, they coming too. My wrist chill, so the brew cold. Make it disappear when the can fold. Then clutch the mic with a strong hold. That boy Joe, he's so bold. Stay fresh when I'm toe throw. Party hard till I KO. You know I stay on my J.O. Talking fly to your H.O. But you know I rap for that pay though. My skill amp, keep a chick damp. Stay stunting with no ramp. Haters flexing but catch cramps. Like the rock, I'm the people's champ. Thoughtful thoughts from my thotty top. She give me top in the parking lot. Then make it drop on my lollipop. We popping bombers on model bras. We going hard, spitting swiping cars. Beating the beat up and leaving scars. Then chugging the brew in the Uber car. Grab beer in my hand, pussy in my lap. I used to set the 40, but I got up out the trap. Grab beer in my hand, pussy in my lap. I used to set the 40, but I got up out the trap. Brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. Turned up, bitch, I'm lost in the sauce. Turned up, bitch, I'm lost in the sauce. Brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up.
Down and dirty.
That does seem like this point.
Is this like Superman?
So dramatic. Red Knight's going down.
Jim, if we don't fight, they will kill us both.
Only logical.
Uh-oh.
And we're back.
Oh, look at the quick shots and everything. All right, welcome back from the break. Nice short break tonight. I'll tell you, we came into this show thinking, hey, we need to redo the Belgian quad episode because things got out a little bit out of hand. And then at the break, we proceeded to get 387 bottles of 12% beer and put them on the table just for the second half.
Thanks, Stubby.
I'm a little worried. Just a little bit though.
Also a little excited.
Which episode are we redoing?
Yeah, exactly.
The Belgian Dark Strong, the quads, the last one you were here for.
Who knows?
Where am I?
This is my first time here.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm really glad that you remember it that way.
Yeah, I
It
might
works out
channel
better
Pete
that
here
way.
in a little bit.
No.
So we're going to get into Belgian Dark Strongs, which again we did cover once, but it was tough to cover righteously. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, it is.
And I think the content was there if you could get past
It
all
is.
the other stuff. But I think we wanted to clean it up a little
It
bit.
just devolved quite a bit towards the end.
And we
Yeah.
also wanted
Yeah.
to drink a bunch of quads. So
Yeah, and I have to say this is probably one of my more favorite beer styles. I love it. I think it's
How
fantastic.
can you not?
And boy, it can get you in trouble.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the BJCP style guide on this, just the length of the paragraph that's the overall impression
It's amazing.
gives you an idea of what the monster this beer is, because it's a full paragraph. It's not
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and read it? I
Yeah,
think
so
that's a good.
a dark, complex, very strong Belgian ale with a delicious blend of malt richness, dark fruit flavors, and spicy elements. Complex, rich, smooth, and dangerous. See, I feel like you could end it there. But it says the aroma is complex with rich, sweet, malty presence, significant esters and alcohol, and an optional light to moderate spiciness. The malt is rich and strong and can have a deep, bready, toasty quality, often with a deep caramel complexity. The fruity esters are strong to moderately low and can contain raisin, plum, dried cherry, fig, or prune notes. Spicy phenols may be present, but usually have a peppery quality, not clove-like. Light vanilla is possible. Alcohols are soft, spicy, perfumey, and or rose-like, and are low to moderate in intensity. Hops are usually not present, but in a very low spicy floral or herbal hop aroma is acceptable. No dark roast or malt aroma, no hot alcohols or solventy aromas. So that's a pretty involved description. There's a lot in there for an overall impression, which is really just supposed to be kind of an overview of what the style is. And you know, with some of these styles that we do, especially when it comes to European styles of beer, it's kind of a broad range. Like when we look at the saisons, it's very widely left open to our
Hell,
interpretation.
even the golden ales that we tasted
golden ale,
from England. Holy crap!
Yeah,
they
a
were-
lot of the English ones
they,
are very
they were
broad.
all over the place, man. So
This one, I feel like it really makes a point to go into a lot of detail about what's supposed to be there, because I don't think this is a very broad style. I think there are some particular things that you look for in this. There'll be some variations to it, but you need to hit a few certain things, and you need to avoid a few certain things in order to do this one right.
Yeah, I think, and I think one of the things that to me, I think when you read that description or overall impression, one of the things that comes out to me that I do not like in this style is any type of roast or even
Right.
chocolate flavors.
Right.
When I say chocolate, I mean more like a chocolate malt flavor.
Right.
I don't want any kind of bitterness. I want this to be smooth. But I think one of the biggest problems, I think, especially for homebrewers in this particular style, is that they don't do the proper yeast treatment. So they're usually overly sweet to me. And I don't think that they should be. I mean, you're going to have some residual sweetness, but I think, to me, that kind of ruins it for me. Because
Absolutely, I think that's the key to this one, is you've got to dry it out. You've got to get it into the lower final gravity range in order to make it drinkable, and like you say, to keep it from being sweet.
Well, that could even be like 1020 to 1030 range if it's a huge beer.
Right.
And that's still going to taste dry.
I mean,
you know?
that one that you guys tasted that I did a couple years ago, I mean, that one was down at 10-12. I mean, it was
Much
relatively dry. But you still got that dark fruit candy flavor, you know? So I think ultimately, though, and this is kind of the way I perceive your big Belgian beers. And, you know, a lot of times we talk about when I'm explaining to people the difference between, you know, and adjuncts, I think is a really good point when it comes to this particular style because I like to compare it to a barley wine. So if you have a barley wine, it's a 9, 10, 11% alcohol beer, but it is extremely sweet. It's extremely bitter. It's hard to drink a lot of, right? So what do you do by...
What do you do?
What do you do?
What do you do?
Grab beer in my hand, pussy in my lap. I used to
And
sip
technical
the phone before I
difficulties.
got up.
All
There it
right.
went.
Perfect.
Wow.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's from last week. Okay.
Nice.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah.
The signature
Damn, that
of
was the
Coming Brew
first one
Radio.
tonight.
Belgian
Yeah.
Dark Strong.
I don't know the
take
intro.
3.
The intro was kind of crappy, but anyway.
But one of the things that stands out to me here too is it says significant esters and alcohol, but it also goes on to say that the alcohols are soft and spicy, perfumey and rose-like. There should not be hot alcohols or solventy aromas, which is really
Right.
important with this style.
But what the point I was trying to make before the music came in and interrupted me was
Ruined
that
the entire world.
I know was that, you know, why do they add adjuncts in there? And a lot of it not only is it flavor, but it also lightens the body,
Right.
makes it a more approachable beer that you can drink more of it. Because I guarantee you, I could sit down and drink a whole quad by myself. I don't know if my wife would like it. I'd have a hard time drinking a whole 750 of barley wine. I mean,
No, I agree with you on that.
Especially
And
like
we
English.
keep going back to that when we talk about the Belgian styles, that's a hallmark of them is the drinkability. So,
yeah, and this is it's kind of interesting because we had a lot of feedback on the Belgian episodes. I think people really enjoyed those, so that's one of the reasons we really wanted to kind of go back over some of this. So what we have tonight, we got a couple different beers to drink and discuss while we're discussing the style. And one of the ones that we have, I think this is a fantastic beer, is the North Coast Brothers Theolonis.
Brother Thelonious.
Brothers Theolonis.
Thelonious.
Yeah. Something like that. I think they're actually getting sued for that name right now. I think I
By
read that somewhere.
Thelonious Monk.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was, but I saw some kind of lawsuit. But
That's
anyway.
mine. What we're passing around here is my quad. It's undercarbonated and a little bit young, but this is the same recipe that Stubby brews. It's 100% Pilsner malt and then just a couple pounds of D180 candy
The
syrup.
dragon? Or
No,
is
the
it
Dragon's a
another
little
No,
different.
this is
Okay.
the Westie clone, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
a Westie clone. Yeah.
But what I did is I used the Mangrove Jack triple yeast that Shawn recommended last time he was in, which I've been really happy with. I like that there's a dry option for this type of beer. I think it came out nice. It to me this just tastes young. It should have been bottle conditioned and instead it was kegged and I drank it all before it was ready. So
You know,
Honestly,
easy to
my
do.
first impression is I get anise.
Really?
Yeah, I get like an anise.
yeah,
note
there's
to
a little
it.
bit in there.
Actually,
I
I see it too.
get a lot of
Not a lot. I mean, but just a little. Not anus,
Right in the
Anise.
anise.
Colonel Angus.
but I mean,
I broke him. I'm sorry.
I mean, I get that's some of the notes. I mean, maybe that dark fruit with a
No,
little
I do
spice.
get a little bit of anise in there. You're right.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
I get a lot of dark cherry flavor, personally, like
Yeah,
like
I would
black
agree.
cherries.
Mhm.
I'm surprised that it's only candy sugar Pilsner.
Well, and that's one of the things that really impressed me with, you know, when I did this the first time, this particular recipe was, you know, I thought you had to have all those specialty grains like the caramel malts and the special B and all of that, and I don't know if it's actually necessary.
Well, I think one of the things using the triple yeast that Shawn recommended, I think, was really a little bit of a stroke of genius because it's got some of those spicy phenolics in there that contribute to. That's where I think that anise character is coming from. Is it's a combination of yeast phenols and the flavor from the candy syrup, and so between the yeast having a complex character to it, and then the candy syrup. I think that gives it a complexity.
Well, I would say that this is completely different
Than yours? Oh, absolutely.
And
yeah.
I think not that I'm saying it's bad or worse. Or
It's not as good as yours.
It's just different.
Yeah, it is different though.
And I think that's just the yeast choice. Mine was the.
And yours was bottle conditioned and aged appropriately too. This is still pretty young. I just brewed this a couple months ago.
What specialty malts did you say you used?
None. It's 100% Pilsner malt, and
I'm surprised you got such a dark color with only using 180 candy sugar.
it's 2 pounds of D180, so 2 packs in 5 gallons.
So this beer that we brought, we used 270 candy sugar, and we used a lot of it for a
you did
36-gallon batch. We used 18 pounds.
Yeah. And we used a combination of rock candy and syrup.
That's a pretty close proportion to what I did, but you used 270 and I had 180. But I think it's once you get dark enough, it's so dark.
Well, the reason I bring it up, our
isn't that dark?
I don't think ours is this dark. That's
Oh, really?
I was surprised how dark a color you got.
Well, I think the older it gets
that's
too, as it cellars, it's going to get darker.
That's about how dark mine was too.
Yeah.
It was. But anyway, I think it was nice, man. I really like that one. And if it's young, it's going to only get better.
Yeah. Well, no, it's
what's the
not because
ABV?
it's almost gone.
What's the ABV?
It tends to happen.
It's only about 9.
Okay.
It's on the lower end.
All right.
We'll come steal some out of your kegerator.
So basically, all this is
There's more.
And would you pitch 2 packs or 3 packs of yeast?
I think it was just 2.
2 packs of Belgian.
Because I was in the 9% range, 2 packs of dry yeast.
Yeah.
is plenty.
Yeah, that should
So
be plenty.
two packs of the
Mangrove Jack triple yeast.
Triple yeast.
Yeah.
M31.
How many pounds of Pils malt?
Ooh, I don't know.
18, 19 pounds.
Probably something like that. Yeah.
And then 2 packs of
2 packs of D180. Yeah.
Was the D180 in the boil or was it after?
No,
that?
I put it in probably the last few minutes of the boil.
Right.
Yeah.
Just enough to sterilize.
Yeah. I mean, it's already sterile to begin with, but it was just kind of mixing it and getting it ready to go.
And this is one of the things we talked about too. And even though you may spend a little more money on this beer, man, what a bargain!
It is. Yeah.
I mean, you think about what I paid for each one of these bottles that we have here tonight was $12 to $15 each. So man, when you make it for yourself at home, it's a bargain.
Hell yeah, it is.
If you can keep your ass out of it, that's a problem.
Well, I don't try to keep out of it.
Exactly.
So I'm never disappointed with the result.
That's why you just keep brewing them.
That's what I told Austin the other day. I said, man, I think that's all I'm going to brew is triple and quads. I don't think I'm going to brew anything else.
I'm going to just buy the Modelo.
Yeah. Buy the water to fill in between.
All right. So anyway, we kind of hit on that a little bit. Appearance, it says deep amber to deep coppery brown in color. Dark in this context implies more deeply colored than golden, which I find that an odd statement.
I do too, because I've never had one that wasn't a very dark beer.
Well, I mean, brown.
No, mostly
or
brown.
garnet.
Very dark brown, but I mean,
I've had them pretty much the
deep
color of
coppery
a
brown,
like
that's-
a double.
But but more deeply colored than golden.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think they would be a little darker than that.
Maybe
a Tubal.
Maybe it's trying to distinguish it from some of the other Belgian styles that tend to be golden, right? And
Right, maybe. Or maybe Belgian Golden Strong.
Yeah, that might be
trying to
it.
discern from. Huge, dense, mousy, persistent cream. Moosey. I was trying to not say the other word that sounds like that. Persistent cream to light tan-colored head. Can be clear to somewhat hazy. Oh,
see, now that's one, if I was judging this, that I would give a little bit on the guidelines, because I think it's difficult to brew a 12% beer with a persistent head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when you have a large percentage of adjuncts in there, and you're getting to a low finishing gravity.
I think that's when
it's
you
easier
use
to
carbonation.
bottle condition it though.
Yeah.
If you got a good bottle conditioning protocol, I think you can produce a very significant, consistent head.
Significant
the
head, yes,
density's high.
but persistent head. One that lasts a long time. When you have the high alcohol and a low finishing gravity, that's hard to do, is all I'm saying. And a large part of your, or significant part of your fermentables are adjuncts, so there's not proteins or anything coming
Yeah.
out of it. I mean, you have several
Right.
strikes
Yep.
against you.
No, I
So
get you.
Open
I'm
up
saying
Thelonious.
if I
Is
were
that a
judging
Thelonious?
it and it didn't have a persistent head, I wouldn't knock it for that, is all. And that's true with any real high alcohol beer, I think.
And of course, at 12%, you might forget that it's
That's
supposed
true.
to have a persistent head by the time you finish it.
Because I was about Stubby just opened a Thelonious, and that's one that I can remember opening the larger format bottles of before, and seeming like it did have more of a persistent head on that. So
Okay, so what I immediately think of this one here though is, to me, it's really spicy and almost earthy and dirty.
yeah, it's much more earthy.
yeah, it's
That
strange.
beer.
I don't remember. I remember
It's a classic style.
I remember this being a lot different than this.
It's pretty light, too. This is what they're talking
Yeah.
about on the deep coppery color.
But I mean, I would say that's in the Double color range. You know, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's in the Double. Yeah.
Does this?
I think it's pretty standard.
ABV.
Does it have a date on it?
You know, I don't know.
You're right. That is very spicy.
Yeah.
And dirty,
Yeah.
earthy, I guess. When
Sweeter.
when you guys hear me
Well, now
say
this
dirty,
is just saying Abbey Ale.
yeah.
I don't know that this is claiming to be a quad.
I think it is a quad.
Yeah, I think it is.
9%.
9.4.
I mean,
the range.
that's in the alcohol range,
Yeah.
but
I don't know.
I mean, like a quad is not just a double with higher alcohol. The double is a different animal.
Yeah, well, you know, yeah, exactly. But this, to
So
me,
they're-
this is more of a dark strong.
I think it's you're right. I think it's more towards the dark strong end of things, but I don't know that this fits really the
right. Well, we're going to
the
drink three
quintessential.
philosophers
You know
in-
what you think.
We're going to drink three philosophers here in a minute, and it's 9.4.
Say that again.
Right.
Yeah, three philosophers.
That's more than two.
But no, it's only 0.4% bigger than this one. So
It seems
Right.
like Thelonious was actually included for a long time.
yeah,
Most
I
of the
think
time,
it
if you're gonna
was
talk
on the
about
style guidelines. Was
I
it
mean,
not
you want to
a-
say quad, which sort of usually emphasizes on the larger aspect of the
Yeah.
beers like this. That's a little different than
Well,
a dark
yeah.
strong, which could be as low as 8, I think. Right?
Well,
So-
and they're classified together. So
Yeah.
you have the Belgian Dark Strong and Quad are pretty much the same beer for the most part. you
quads
know.
usually, when you see quad laid down, it means it's closer to the super high end of the range versus the other. But dark strong could be a much lower ABV beer than you think it would be. It just depends on the gravity, and like a lot of times, or the gravity, but like the colors and things, and
Right.
whatever's really going on with it. But like this, to me, looks like something like Golden Drock or
Yeah, I
they're
agree.
they're not that far off from appearance.
Well, I
you
think
know.
Golden Rock is a
It
Belgian
is,
Dark
yeah,
Strong.
it is, but it's like the appearance
Yeah.
vastly different. Not necessarily, it's darker,
Right.
you know. But I've seen a lot of them that have this color range, you know. So
The one thing I would say about
I like them
tape-
darker than this.
I think this is one that would be a great beer to pair with food
Yes, it
because
is,
of the spiciness
actually.
and
It
a
is,
little
Right.
bit lighter flavor profile to it. It's not as heavy.
This
in-
is
in
North
terms
Coast,
of-
right?
I've actually
Yeah, it's
had
North
this
Coast.
one paired with a food, many different beer pairings.
Like smoked cheese would be good with this.
Go nice
Yeah.
with a nice
Steak.
baby back rib.
Like Brandon
A baby back rib. There you go.
having yours with this. It's yours seems
Oh,
to have more body
completely
and
different,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean it's like the body character is a whole different animal. Plus like Chris said with that dark cherry and whatnot, it really
Yeah.
comes through a lot more. So
I don't really get as much dark fruit in this one
no.
as I would expect, really. But
Man, I poured myself a lot of that. I got to be careful. It's early.
Game on.
so it
4
says
bottles.
flavor. It says similar to aroma, same malt, ester, phenol, alcohol, and hop comments apply to flavor as well.
No, that's just lazy.
I know, right?
It's like go back and read the previous.
Moderately malty rich on the palate, which can have a sweet impression if bitterness is low. Usually moderately dry to dry finish.
Right. Yeah.
Although may be up to moderately sweet. Medium low to moderate bitterness. Alcohol provides some of the balance to the malt. Generally malty rich balance, but can be fairly even with bitterness. I mean, they're all over the damn
They are
place
all
on
over
that,
the
man.
place
It's
on
like
And the
flavor.
beers are too. I don't think I've had
the
that many that are the
So
same.
basically, get the alcohol up and have semesters in it, and you've hit the mark.
right.
With
It
some
can be
dryness.
sweet or
With some dryness, yeah.
Right.
Drinkable.
Yeah, but it says
It's not a dessert
generally
beer.
malt balanced, but
Yeah.
can fairly even with bitterness. The complex and varied flavors should blend smoothly and harmoniously. The finish should not be heavy or syrupy. And
Right.
I think that ultimately that's what I was saying. I think the biggest problem that I taste at homebrew stuff,
Syrupy.
even
Yeah.
commercial stuff.
Yeah, no, you're right.
It can
Commercial,
be-
a lot of time.
It can be kind of sweet. Yeah.
I think when you look at this guideline, I think a lot can be taken from the way it's written. In that, we talked about the overall impression is a very long paragraph. The flavor is a very short paragraph. The mouthfeel is actually a longer paragraph than flavor is.
And I think there's some interesting comments in the mouthfeel section
Yes.
that explain some of the ambiguity that comes before, right?
Yes.
So there's a Belgian version, or a Trappist version, sorry, and an Abbey version, right? So you're talking about two different schools of the same style of beer, and based on the description here, you're looking at beers that sound different from each other, right? Which can lead to a pretty mixed bag of characteristics in the overall impression. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
like what you have in if you keep going to the actual characteristic ingredients, I think that explains it pretty well. Just like the yeast strains, production of different higher alcohols, esters, and sometimes phenolics vary quite a bit depending on what you're using. Because I mean, there's a lot of different versions of what you can use for this, and there's a lot of different recommendations. Some are cleaner than others, and some of them are definitely just dirty in comparison to the clean ones.
Right.
Yeah, it
Impression
makes
of
you
a
wonder.
complex grain bill when it can actually be very simplistic. Brandon,
Yeah.
Pilsner and sugar.
Right.
You know, I mean, so it's like there's a lot going on there, and it depends on how you boiled it and what you did with it and all of those things. There's a lot of different things going on here.
Right, and I think that's what's really interesting about this particular style of beer is that you can get all those complexities, and I think that's that I like about it so much.
Yeah.
is that you get alcohol warmthness. You get some of the dark fruit character. You get some of the spiciness. You get all of these different effervescent if you have it carbonated correctly.
Right.
And I think a lot of it too is the flavors that build up on your palate as you drink it
Yeah.
too. It's the
There's
beginning of the
a-
glass is different than the end of the glass because you have an aftertaste and things.
There's
like
a
that
lot
that
going
linger.
on in every glass of a dark strong.
Yeah.
And
It's a
you know,
huge amount of flavors. So.
This one to me, the brother Thelonious.
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 Thelonious. Okay. I know. Yeah, it's Thelonious, not Theolonious. All right. Anyway, I'm starting.
Oh, it's coming.
It's coming out. But
It's
this
knocking
one-
on the door.
This one to me has a little bit of too much residual sweetness to me. It's
I
it's
agree.
It's a little approaching on the sweet side to me. I don't know.
An
This
American
is not
version.
one that I would give to somebody if they were like, "What's a Belgian quad?" And you wanted to give them something that was a good representation of it. This is not the first one I would give them because I think this one is a lot more on the spicy side, and I agree that it's a little sweet and the body's a little heavy.
I would call this I don't know. My problem with the difference between the naming is that a lot of
Right.
times when it says quad, that's usually where I find the sweetness lies versus dark strong. But
this doesn't
you know.
claim to be a quad anywhere on the package.
No, I know. This
So-
isn't up to the alcohol level necessarily to really fit into quad territory by American standards either, which is usually like 12% and higher.
Well, I
so.
don't think we're even going to have one that's 12%.
I know. I'm just
No.
saying. It's like
We
they get
got one.
huge.
You got one?
We have one.
Well, let's open this. This is one that I look for. I don't know how old this is because I don't even think they're in our market anymore. Is the Scaldus Noel? This is one I
Yeah.
really wanted for our winter episode, but I couldn't find it, and it's been a long time.
That
since
one's 12.
This one's 2012.
No, it's 12%.
Oh, it's 12%. Yeah, and this one, every time I've ever had it, it has been phenomenal. I don't know if this is the best by date or this is when it was made, but that would be September 14th, 2015.
Usually the European stuff, it's a best buy date, isn't
that
it? That's
good?
what we've found. They don't really do the born on thing. So while we're getting into this, and before we get too far into drinking these beers, let's talk to Shawn and Doug here about your approach towards brewing a quad, because you don't just have to brew one according to what the guidelines say or what you'd like to drink or whatever.
Right.
You've got to serve one to people. So what's your approach? What's your basic idea as you go into writing a recipe and what you want to end up with?
So I think the first thing to point out is this beer is never going to be one of our core beers, right? I mean, we're never going to have this beer on tap in the tap room. We're never going to put this out to market as a mass-produced beer. To us, this is a special beer that we brew because we like it, and the plan right now is that we're going to release this probably once a year. Maybe twice, but right now we're thinking about once a year. This bottle that we brought tonight, we brewed this batch in December. I would classify this as still being very young, very green. When we open it and taste it, you're gonna taste a lot of alcohol. It's comes in at right about 13%. It's very hot, and really this beer takes about 6 to 9 months before it really starts to mellow and come together. And that's part of the reason why we're not planning on releasing it very often. We want to do a big batch, bottle condition it, and set it aside, and then release it after 9 months to a year when it's really coming into its prime.
Maybe
You're
just
also
have
bottle
maybe-
conditioning and corking and caging this too. It looks
right.
like. So.
Yeah.
And probably, it might be even if you really like to do that, is maybe just do it for your anniversary every year. Or
Well,
something.
it's funny you bring that up because we're tentatively planning on brewing this beer like the first, big batch that we do on our big system, bottling it, putting it in storage, and releasing it on our first anniversary of the first anniversary beer. So,
It's definitely our most labor-intensive beer that
I would think so,
we
yeah.
brew and package. I mean, it takes all day just to package it, to bottle and cork it.
And that's just on
Oh, that's
that's
a hell
just
of a-
on the
yeah.
pilot scale.
Right.
It takes all day, right? So, I can imagine the work that's going to go into bottling, caging 30 barrels of this beer. Right?
1,500.
You better have a lot of volunteers.
You volunteers enjoy drinking the beer while they do
Exactly,
it, so
yeah.
Okay, so this beer here, the Scaldless Noel, is the opposite
Nice.
end of the spectrum.
It's really good.
It's like
It is
hot.
good.
It is
hot.
Yeah.
I don't think it's real
I
hot.
don't think it's hot.
I mean, it's not hot, but it's alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for sure.
It's on the high end, that's for sure.
And it's definitely
What's
a
the
lot.
spice that's in there?
It's a lot thinner than that. I'm not sure if it has any spice. I think it's just straight up.
I think that's
the
all
spice
alcohol
from
flavor.
spice from the yeast and the alcohol, maybe. Yeah.
It's a good beer.
Yeah, I've always loved this beer. And then, like I said, it may be made in 2015. Even if it's over the hill, it still tastes pretty good, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
exactly.
good.
Oh, it's
These
great,
beers
yeah.
age really well unless they're just poorly handled.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's one of the things that we're gonna try out tonight. So I found some Three Philosophers 2011, 12, 13, and then we're going to compare it against the 2017. And we're going to talk a little bit about cellaring these beers when we kind of get down to it. So,
Well, that's one thing too, that we can mix this in, and the whole reference of what we're talking about as a second subject is like what y'all were just talking about with the time it takes for a beer that's 13%, needs to age a little bit and be set aside in storage. For you guys, for like a first anniversary, that works better because that's going to make a better beer than it would if you guys said, "Here you go, have this one right off the bat, right out of the fermenter." It's not ready yet, And typically, if somebody were buying a beer, it's been aged to perfection in a lot of ways before they ever get it in their hands.
Right.
So,
And the beautiful thing about this beer, because it's bottle conditioned, the bottle conditioning process eats up any residual oxygen in the bottle, so
Right.
you don't have to worry about oxidation. The high alcohol content allows it to age gracefully, shall we say, and quite honestly, it just gets better and better and better the older it gets. The whole reason we brewed this beer to begin with, it's all Doug's fault, really.
It's always my fault.
A couple of years ago, Doug's been brewing this recipe for quite some time. A couple years ago, he came to my house for a Christmas party and had a big 750 ml bottle that was 5 years old at the time.
Was that the Texas OU game?
No, it was Christmas. Texas OU is Christmas in October. This is official Christmas.
I barely remember that.
I remember we drank a bottle of it.
Yeah. So he brought a bottle of his homebrew version of this beer and opened it up, and I had 2 sips, and I said, Doug, we've got to brew this beer. I've quite honestly, and I've told a lot of people this, I've told Doug this many times, it was one of the best beers I've ever had in my life. Homebrew, commercial, you name it. This 5-year-old bottle of beer that he'd had sitting in his cellar, and I was just amazed by it. So we've been working on perfecting the recipe and scaling it up to a commercial level. Anyway, so again, this particular bottle we brewed in December, still pretty green. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to open this up here. So, without necessarily giving us your exact recipe, can you talk to us about your approach to the grain bill and
Yeah, so the grain bill on this is primarily pills, little pale malt, and less than 5% special B and debitter black, and then of course we mentioned the candy sugar that we and candy syrup that we add to the beer as well.
So very restrained on the specialty malts then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We get we try to pull most of the flavor from the yeast and from the candy sugar, and color as well. And you can see, compared to yours, it's not nearly as dark, right?
No, you're right. It's much more along the lines of the Thelonious that we just had. In terms
now,
of
the
color.
interesting thing though about this beer, the longer it ages, it does tend to darken up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got another batch that is a little over a year old.
I
that
want to
is
say
much darker than this. That is pretty fantastic right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we
typically a little bit when your beer gets older and oxidizes, it does darken.
Yeah.
So
I want to say we did this the first time in February, right, Shawn? And
the first batch we did, together was in February. So that batch is, right at 13 months old, and we only have 12 bottles left, unfortunately.
Well,
I would have brought one
I
of
can
those.
tell.
Fantastic.
I can tell from it
fantastic.
that
I like
the
this a lot.
approach to the grain bill is restraint and just like a pinch of salt of a couple of different things. And then the sugar adds some complexity, and then the yeast adds some complexity, the alcohol, and then age.
Yeah,
kind of
well, there's a
layers
lot
everything
going on in
together.
this glass,
Yeah.
and it's fantastic. It's
yeah,
great.
it's
beer.
really good. But I can tell you that you can tell it's still really young. The alcohol is out front, but that'll mellow with age.
See, I don't get a whole ton of alcohol out of
this
it
is easy
personally.
to me, compared to some.
No, I'm just saying it's going to get fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Once it ages out. That's just
But there's
Okay.
and that's kind of the thing that you have to think about this particular style of beer is if you like this style of beer, you got to have a pipeline.
Yes.
yeah, no kidding.
I mean, because it's something that I really liked, and it's one of those things that I don't drink a whole lot of.
Careful of the yeast
I mean,
on the bottom.
A strange man has wandered into the studio.
The thing that I would say is if you like this style of beer, it's kind of like making wine, and the reason I say that is, I mean, really, this is on the same level alcohol as wine, and the kind of the way I kind of look at like even wine aging is, one of the things that you'll notice about wine when it changes over time, at beginning is fruit and tart and fruity. And then,
Toot and fruity.
It's hot and alcoholic, right? And then as it ages, the alcohol starts to soften.
Yeah.
That tartness goes away. The oak comes to the forefront. Well, the same thing kind of happens in this, I think, in a quad is, alcohol starts to mellow, and then you start getting all these dark fruit characters. There is some oxidation properties that actually help this.
Right.
Some micro oxidation. Boy,
all the big beers.
Well, see, and that's one of the areas where I think some brewers make mistakes in brewing these beers, particularly in writing the recipes, is that you get examples that do have a nice oxidation note to them and some notes of some of those darker, maybe dried fruits and that kind of thing. And then they add in specialty malts to mimic those rather than, layering
age,
flavors and letting age and letting alcohol and letting that thing create those flavors. And that's the big difference. And I think, you said it right. You've got to have a pipeline. This is one of those where you want to brew, but you don't need beer. Your kegs are full or whatever, but you feel like brewing.
Well,
that's a great time to brew a quad when you can brew it and set it aside and let it do its thing
again and again. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, and this is to his point too. Is that to Shawn's point is that if you're going to do this style of beer, don't keg it. Put it in the bottles where you can let it age and it age quicker and bottle condition it.
Unless you're impatient.
Well, you'll very rarely
Brandon
hear
and
me
I
agree with you, but on that particular point. But on this beer, I do agree. For a truly exceptional one, I think this does have to be bottle conditioned.
It just takes some time.
We may do a few one-off kegs and keg condition them for service only in the tap room, just because I think that's kind of fun. But for the most part, you're right. This is a beer that needs to be bottle aged. I mentioned that we may look at doing a twice yearly release. The other thing that we really want to do with this beer, we want to barrel age some, if we get around to doing that, that would kind of be the off. Or the biannual release, if you will. There'll be a barrel aged version and a regular version. So.
And I think this is a style that's really well suited to that. Probably half the quads I've ever brewed, I've done on oak of some kind. Obviously, I'm not.
I don't think we actually have one of those tonight.
Do we have one? Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we had
barrel
one
aged,
in this giant oversized growler earlier, which was really excellent from Oak Islands.
Oak Islands in Dallas, right?
Yeah.
Garland.
Ish.
Okay.
Yeah, Garland.
Dallas.
Okay.
May as well say Dallas.
Metroplex.
Garland is Dallas. Yeah.
That side of town.
Yeah, too far to drive.
The Far East. Yeah.
But one of the things about barrel aging it too, on a homebrew level, oak aging it, I should say, not barrel aging, is that it's a forgiving beer in that respect, in that you can throw a bunch of oak into it, and it's got enough going on its own. The flavor is strong enough, the alcohol is strong enough that you don't have to worry too much about putting too much oak in it. You can put some in, and it'll ramp up to it, and it'll blend in nicely with the flavors that are already there, and it makes it easy to do on a homebrew level. Where some other beers, it can be easy to, especially if you're using chips or something like that, to get too much
overdo it.
Wood flavor in it, which is it's tough to do with a quad.
I think it does hide it.
Here's what's
well.
really funny about the beer selection that we have tonight. I don't think we have, other than the Scaldus Noel. I don't know if you would actually call that a quad. Maybe. I mean, it's a Christmas beer, but I mean, I don't think there's any like Christmas spices or anything.
No, yeah,
it tastes like it's spiced to me.
Really?
It does taste
Yeah.
spice.
Yeah, it just tastes like.
I couldn't put my finger on what the spice would be, but
It's very Christmas wintry spices,
Yeah.
but at the same
think-
time, that could easily be an alcohol flavor too.
And I think that you find in this style that there are probably Christmas versions out there where they've added things in like orange peel and whatnot, sort of like a lot of Belgian traditional styles do,
That's one thing I would like to do with this is kind of turn it into a Christmas style beer as well.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't take that much.
Just
Sean
don't put
Wilson's
no.
eyes.
God, he
put a bunch
keeps talking about that.
Don't
He
put.
wants to put candy canes and candy corn and candy and syrup in there.
corn.
Well, as long as you don't put mulling spices in it, that shit sucks. Oh, sorry.
I'm just kidding.
man, we're really moving along quickly here on these beers, aren't we?
I do agree that
Well, there are
We
a
may
lot
have
of
to
them.
do a redo.
this style does lend itself to
A 3 deuce.
to a holiday type of treatment for sure.
Well, I mean, think about. So when you get this one, this is Trois Pistoles. I don't know. I can't speak French.
That's three.
That's
pistols.
close enough for me. Yeah.
Trois Pistoles. Okay, but anyway,
It
That's
translates to
that's
trois
heavily
pistols.
armed in English.
Yeah.
what's that?
That's heavily armed in English.
Oh, is it? I thought it was two pistols.
It's three pistols.
Oh, three pistols.
Two?
Okay.
One for each hand and an extra.
I don't know how to count to three or two in French. Sorry.
It's like de trois, if I remember right.
Sounds a lot like twat.
It sounds a lot like taking a dump. De trois.
No, it's getting weird.
It is
Weird in
getting
here,
It's
isn't
getting
it? Yeah.
This is one
beer's
that I will
not,
say.
but the
Chris
dialogue
Chris
is.
was saying that this was his favorite, and this is would be high on my list. I think of quads that I've had, and this brewery in particular, I like everything of theirs.
Okay,
I've ever
so
had.
to the
La Fin
to-
du Monde.
to- all right, if I let me see if you guys get this. What I get out of it? Apricots, like dried apricots.
I was going more plum. But
Oh my god, dude! I love dried apricots.
I wish you hadn't
And it
said that
tastes-
because now that's
Oh
all
no,
I can
you're
think
right.
about.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Dried
is.
apricots.
Kirsten 100% agrees with you and tells me I'm wrong.
Does it not taste like dried apricots?
Yeah, it's there for sure. Yeah.
That's all Doug ate when he was hiking the Appalachian Trail, so he's in heaven right now.
Is that what it tastes like to
I
you?
should have just taken some quad with me. I'll be okay.
Does it taste like dried apricots to you, Doug?
Yeah, now that you mention it, it does.
Yeah.
Oh.
It really does. Wow.
You know, I think that flavor in particular is coming out a little bit stronger this time because we just drank like 4 or 5 others.
Well, the one thing I would say about this one
Out of
to
ours,
me is
you were getting apricot.
this one to me more
Yeah, I get the stone fruit.
this one to me is more lighter. I mean,
Lighter in flavor.
lighter
Yeah.
flavor. It's not as less
It's
spicy.
more effervescent,
less,
too,
Less
yeah.
Definitely
spicy.
effervescent.
Less spicy. More estery.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that
It's
the
only
fruit
9%.
character
They didn't
does
even
stand out.
I get a lot more plum, like plum wine plum in this than I do apricot personally.
Really? I don't get any plums at all. To me, that's just me though.
You're wrong, Chris.
You're
wrong.
I just think
Fair
our
enough.
palates are a little bit
In France,
piled upon. at
dried
the
plum
moment.
is apricot.
Yeah.
Never mind.
That wouldn't
Oh.
surprise me at all. Those European bastards.
You know,
Or
twat,
raisins.
twat pistolas.
Oh, we forgot to eat our
I mean,
Christmas
twat
pudding.
pistolas.
We didn't forget.
I'm going to save it for Nigel. You know this
Yeah, you
stuff
should,
never goes
actually.
bad.
I know.
It's
Ever.
like fruitcake.
It does look like fruitcake.
That's
That works.
English
Survives nuclear winter,
Holocaust, food.
So, what would you say? I mean, we talked a lot about. Well, I don't guess we really delved in it too much, but on your grain bill, you primarily pills. I guess most people would agree, right?
Yeah.
If you were going to use specialty malts, maybe Special B, D-Bitter Black,
Yeah,
Special B is probably the most
common. Yeah.
But man, when it comes to
But
special B,
restraint.
I think it's got to
Restraint,
restraint.
well, just eat it.
If you exactly, yeah, eat
Yeah,
it. And,
eat it, and
yeah.
you'll see it. I mean, it just tastes like raisins.
If you drink a beer and you taste special B in it, like that,
use way
you've
too
used
much.
too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm the same way with Carafa.
Right,
Man,
exactly.
Carafa, man,
Yeah.
it just to me, if you use too much Carafa, it just ruins a beer.
It does.
And I think people overuse special B because special B tastes like oxidation.
Yeah, maybe.
And really
Get that dark
strong
fruit character.
raisins.
I never
I
thought
mean,
of
I'm
that
sorry,
before, but
plums.
You're right.
Yeah,
raisins.
plums.
Uh-huh.
English plums and raisins.
I was thinking, honestly, a little
Vanilla.
bit of victory would probably
Why do you
go
tell
well
me
in
why
this
do you
as
say you're
well.
Smuggling plums.
A little bready, toasty.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
I think there's a lot of room to work
begins.
with that.
Okay,
But like the simplicity is the one that the actual Trappist styles. It's the simplicity. It's
Yeah.
dark candy, sugar, pills, and yeast.
Well, and
more than-
supposedly,
and
the
from
monks
what I
sots. I
The monks
mean,
couldn't call Stubby and order up a bunch of different.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there
Go
wasn't.
into
There
the
was
brew.
nothing there for
well,
that.
I think ultimately, I guess, think about this. Really, these guys have been making beers for millennium, and if you think about it, back in the day, they didn't have all these specialty malts, man. They didn't call it Byerman and go, hey, I want Carafa,
Right.
and they had grain, and what
and
they
they had the
did-
hops that were available to them too, which is pretty
Right.
much like Styrian or
Right.
Sots.
Yeah, or just regular old noble hops, and so if you think about it, I mean, back in the day, the way that they made these beers is they made them with candy sugar.
Right.
They didn't make it with all these specialty grains and crap because they didn't have them. I mean, that's relatively a new.
They could have had the
Isn't
sugar.
that really the story of specialty grains? Period is that these were developed to mimic what brewers had done organically
Yeah.
over
A
the
lot
years.
of it
anyway,
Yeah, it should have
you
been.
know?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
here's a recipe that I've got. This is one that when I brew this, I put Brett on it also, and I oak age it. So it's a little bit different because it's there to support the Brett characteristic as well, and then also be able to put oak and rum and that kind of thing on it. But it's all Pilsner malt, and then about 14% Munich in there also, the 10 Lavabonds, so the light Munich, and then about 4% aromatic, 4% Caramunic 2, 4% Special B, and about 2% melanoidin, and then about 5% sugar.
Okay.
You know, when
And
you look at that recipe,
That makes about a 12% beer.
there. One thing I find a very common thing with these, like the common thread, you'll find some of the similar ingredients in something like a Doppelbock. There's
Yeah,
some
you're right.
similarity to a Doppelbock a lot of times.
yeah,
you
they're
know.
almost the same recipe.
It's just
right?
not
It's
quite
pretty
as
damn
dark.
close.
It doesn't go in that range. But like when you look at the aromatic or like Special B or Caramunic or something
Yeah,
like
I
that,
mean,
I've
if
seen
you-
that
if
show
you-
up in a lot of
If he,
recipes.
if he switched out the aromatic for
Melanoidin, you know.
Caramunic or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, it's got Caramunic in it.
Oh,
Yeah,
does
that's
it?
what.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you know, the aromatic and the melanoidin and the Munich, and those are really more of more along the base malt flavor profile than anything. You're not getting dark notes. out
Right.
of
You
those.
just got to
It's
pull away
more
from the
of a-
breadiness and the heaviness.
right.
You know?
and then with a touch of the darkness to it. And again, that one I put Brett on it, and I also oak age it. It ends up normally being between 12 and 13%. It's a big old beer, and it takes almost a year to make. And so that's a little bit
And
different.
he didn't
probably.
bring any.
Do you have any on top of your house that we could go taste right now?
No, it's been a while
Sounds
since I've made that one.
amazing.
No, that's the
It is a
quad I
good beer.
normally brew. Instead, I brewed the one I brought tonight, which was the Westy clone that
Yeah.
Stubby turned me on to. And to be honest with you, I think I would lean back towards that.
Well,
Westy
you know,
clone again.
and I think this is the biggest. Here's another Stubby's tip for you. And we may do this again at some point. But one of the things that I would say is that I think ultimately, and homebrewers are the most guilty of it, is they overcomplicate their grain bills. Yeah. And whereas I think,
And that's
you
an
know,
example of an overcomplicated grain bill.
Yeah, I think so. And I think if you actually look at the most perfect examples of most beers in the world, there may have one or two specialty malts in it, if that much. I mean, it's really reserved, because I think a lot of times, especially homebrewers, they go, and I'll go in there and mill up a grain bill for somebody that's got 6 freaking specialty malts in it. Well, what that happens is that your palate can't discern all those different flavors. So what does it start to do? It just starts to taste like mud.
Right.
It's like if you go, think of it as like when you're making let's say a pork chop in your kitchen, you know, and you're putting, oh man, you know what? I think a little cayenne pepper would taste good. Oh, maybe some bay leaves, or maybe, you know, some rosemary, and you know, it's kind of the same thing. But you overcomplicate it. Well, then your pork chop tastes like crap. But if you just put some salt and pepper on it, you know, it probably tastes better, you know, than putting all that other shit in it.
You know, it's funny you bring that up because
Yeah.
of the question earlier about the beer pairing with barbecue, right? In my opinion, the best rub for a brisket is salt and pepper.
Right.
Nothing else.
Simplicity.
And if you look at some of the best barbecue joints in the state of Texas, it's the same thing,
Yep.
right? Franklin's,
Yeah.
by all accounts, the best barbecue place in, well, some say in the United States. Salt and pepper. That's the rub.
Yeah,
Yep.
we were
Keep
just
it
talking
simple.
about this very thing on the way here.
Yeah, exactly. That the comment you made about muddling your recipe, I think, is extremely valid. And you know, it's funny. I do a lot of research into building my recipes. Right, I read a lot of articles about the beer style. I read a lot of other people's recipes. Just to get ideas of things that I like and I don't like, and when I'm trying to put my recipes together. And it's amazing how often I see these recipes that are so complicated that I can't remember them when I'm trying to tell somebody what's in them, right?
Right.
The best recipes in my mind, or the best beers that we make in my mind, and when somebody asks me, hey, what's the recipe? I can recall it instantly, right? Because there's like 5 ingredients in it. The worst beers that I've ever made have been ones that I couldn't remember the grain bill to save my life because there's 50 different things in it and it just
Too much.
It didn't turn out well, right? So I think it's a great point.
Yeah, and I think you just really you got to be. I think in the best way to explain that, Shawn, is, at least in my opinion, is that most people's palate are not that sophisticated enough to be able to pick out 10 different flavors when you're drinking it or eating it. So you want to have maybe dominant flavors and then maybe some nuances that make you think, and I think especially in a beer like this, especially like think of a Hefeweizen. Think about all the different flavors that you get from that. You're not getting really hop character from that, but you're getting spiciness, cloviness, maybe some bubble gum, banana, fruitiness, citrus, all of those different things. Citrusness. But think about that. That's all of those are produced by the yeast, and I think this particular, if you have too much crap in your grain bill, it doesn't allow the yeast to do its magic.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And the point you made earlier about comparing some of these big quads to wine, right? I think that point is very valid in this part of the conversation too, because if you think of some of the great wines of the world, there's one ingredient that's providing the sugar. It's one variety of grape. They're not mixing 15 different grapes in there. And I know there are really good wines that are blends, but most of the time you're drinking wine that's a cab grape or a Sauv Blanc grape or a Zen grape. It's a single ingredient that produces memorable wines, and I know that's not completely possible all the time in beer, but to be honest with you, some of my favorite beers that I've ever made have been smash beers, right? One base malt, one hop, a yeast, and some water, and as simple as it gets. And they're so drinkable, and it's so easy to enjoy the flavors that go into that kind of product, and you can take the lessons learned there and apply that to some of your more complex beers as well, and I think get great results.
Yeah. So this beer that we just
is that a dumper?
No,
I haven't had
it's
a sip
dumper.
yet.
I don't much care for it, but it's really perfumey, I guess is what I would say.
Cola.
Is this the Save the World?
Yeah.
It may be just cola.
I wasn't going to call it out on the radio because I was going to bash it a little bit.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Here goes Brandon's second sponsorship.
Yeah, well, it just may need some time. I don't know how old it is, but
Well, if it's up here right now, it's older than.
yeah, but not
To me,
not a
almost
fan.
it almost tastes like it has bread in it.
Yeah,
That's all I can
agree
think
with
of
you
is
on
like
that, yeah.
Brett characters. So.
Yeah, it's strange.
It's
It
not
has,
done.
it has an odd
I'm
smell
getting
to it.
what's that candy that you get at the movie theater? Sweet tarts. I'm getting a little sweet tart finish on that.
Yeah, it's strange.
It says hints of Brett,
That might be what I'm
Yeah,
getting.
Maybe that's
then.
what it is.
so it might have bread in it.
Maybe
But
that's why that-
if it's as old as it might be, based off when I talked to him before, they're not distributing up here anymore.
Yes.
So that could be sitting around
Smarties.
for a couple of years.
Yeah, there's no date or anything on this,
Right.
and it might have Brett.
I think that's Brett.
I
that
think
we're
this
tasting.
one's past its prime.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes
That's
me
all it
feel a
is.
little bit better about saying
All
that.
I can say is
Yeah.
every time I took a sip, I was like, man, I'm feeling like that's all Brett I'm getting. So
Cola. I get cola out of it.
I have some. I'm
Well,
picking up some
Brett,
on some
Actual
chocolate.
cola nut cola.
I don't know, man.
Brock said Smarties.
Yeah.
I think
And
you hit it on the head.
And
Smarties.
yeah, there's a little
Yeah.
Smarties in there. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and I think it's just too old. I think it's past its
Yeah.
prime.
all right, well,
Okay, so should
we have a few beers that were here that were not
Yeah.
the full-on tier type of or vertical alignment beers, and that's why I was like, should we drink those first? Let's go ahead and hit them.
I think we ought to do the Three Philosophers next.
Ooh,
All right,
vertical.
Thank you.
All right, so vertical and the concept of cellaring here.
Yeah.
Here's something that we've kind of been discussing off and on. Obviously, you get some beers that you want to put aside.
We should go.
You wanna
old-
save
old
them?
to newest, right?
Yes,
definitely,
Yeah. You want to save these beers. It's something that, like, okay, you go out and you get a release from somewhere. Now, if this is like a standard pale ale or anything, this needs to be a big beer for the most part. It needs to be a wild beer, a sour beer. It needs to be something that's barrel aged or whatever. Now, just remember that by the time you get it, typically the brewer has made a purposeful point of keeping that beer to where they're ready for you to drink it when you buy it. Now, not every brewery is that way, but typically that's the standard. You know, like wild beers and stuff, I think there's a little bit of a leeway on that. Sometimes they're expecting you to take it home, and the beer's going to change over time. They know that their fans are going to take that beer and hold it, sell it, whatever.
And I think the breweries that have that as a goal are really good about communicating.
Yes.
that, right?
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't always happen, but it should.
Absolutely.
Well, they're good about communicating it because what they want you to do is buy 4 bottles. And
Yes.
drink one every 4 months, kind
Right.
of thing. You know. So.
And what you just said is another point. When you do go buy beers that you plan and think that you would want to hold to the side and age for any period of time, buy enough that you want to drink one right then to know what's going on with that beer and how long it really needs to sit. Because, say, if this is a bourbon barrel-aged whatever, you know, I can think of the time that I've bought a case of the bourbon barrel-aged Winter Warmer around here from RAR, you know, back 5 years ago. It was hard to get a hold of, so I bought a bunch of it at once because I liked it, right? You drink one then, find out where it's at. You know, that's something that over time, after
I have
having
4 in the
had some
fridge
of
at
those...
home if you want some more.
Yes, I do.
Just saying.
Yes, he does. Just thinking in terms of like, well, you like a beer. Once you know what a beer should be or what you want it to be, if it's going to age over time, that's something that you can try one up front when you know they continue to make it and say, well, is it anywhere close to where I like it to be? Before you're going to know whether or not you want to set it aside. Because if you do, it might go away from where you want it to be, or it may take time to get to where you want it to be.
It also depends on what your capacity for storage is and how you're going to cellar these things. And what I wanted to say before we opened this beer, and I feel comfortable saying it now that we have opened it, is that there's a limit
Yes.
on how long you should keep beers.
What year was this?
There are very few
2011.
beers that will survive well more than a couple years.
You know,
Yeah.
I get a lot of oxidation in the nose,
It's got to be huge alcohol, really,
but
to do it.
it tastes pretty damn good.
And I think it tastes old, man.
Really?
It does
Yeah.
taste old.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not horrible. I
It's
drink
not
it.
bad. It's not bad, but it's definitely past its prime.
This is
To
the
me-
kind of beer that you're going to find in a lot of places that shouldn't be for
To
sale.
me, it just tastes like cherries. Oh, dark cherries. I mean, it's oxidized.
The cherry flavor changes, I think, with time. Where it's more of a bright cherry flavor before, not necessarily a maraschino, but more of like a normal cherry flavor.
Right.
This is a very dark, rich cherry flavor in it.
Cherry pie.
Cooked
Yeah,
cherry pie.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a good way to
exactly.
put it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Or almost cooked
And
prune.
But I would say this.
What's that?
I was going to say cooked prune, maybe even.
Yeah.
Well,
Prune. Ooh, that
this-
just
It's
sounds
even more
gross.
dense.
This is. I would say though this particular. I had this particular vintage when it was 2 and 3 years old, and it was knock your socks off.
Right.
Amazing.
Right.
Yeah,
This is a beer I'm pretty familiar with, so I'm pretty comfortable in saying that I think this is past its prime.
yeah,
You know, I
do.
didn't get a lot of the oxidation in the nose, but in the finish for me, I'm
Yeah.
Oh, I do.
feeling it.
Sure.
It's really strong in the finish.
It's grandma's
It's kind
titties.
of papery.
And this is still this is a bottle conditioned beer as well.
Titties? Is that what you
Grandma's titties. That's what this beer is.
said? Oh, okay.
Why do you know what that tastes like?
Not taste.
That's what we were talking about.
Some
Tastes like
80-year-old
okay.
sweat.
Let me clarify. It tastes
Brandon
like
keeps
grandma's
with the
titties
grandmas
look,
again.
All right.
Hey, my
No,
grandma,
Grandma,
my
no.
grandma's single.
All right.
Want me to get a phone number for you?
I don't know, man. Not after drinking this.
Well, he is going to be a grandpa, so or is
That's true.
Yeah.
Oh, so I guess I shouldn't talk about grandma's titties since my wife is going to have grandma's titties. in
Or
about a
maybe
week.
you
Yeah,
should.
So that's how you know.
Never mind. I walk back my entire statement.
All right, so now we're gonna.
I'm really glad she doesn't listen to this show.
Oh, we're gonna
For
send
more
her
than
an
one
email.
reason.
Don't you worry.
So this next one,
I hate dumping that out, but I can't.
The next one we're gonna do is
not.
2012. So
Yeah.
Well, what'll be interesting to see is, I'm not so sure that most of these are.
Man, that's old.
So for
It is
three philosophers, if you have the old label, throw it out.
Well, now here's the thing.
Or throw it
how
back
did you
and
store
just
it? Because
suck it up.
this probably sat on a
Right,
shelf
yeah.
warm
It did shit.
for 7 years.
It sat on the shelf.
It depends how you're storing it, So there's a few different ways. One is just sitting in a cupboard or a shelf or whatever. The other is actually at cellar temps, which would be more about 50 degrees or so, right?
Yeah, 40s and 50s.
And that would make a difference.
Low-
And the other
40s
way is to
really.
keep it refrigerated. And if you keep it refrigerated the whole time, it's going to be different. That's plenty.
And see, that's the kind of the key here. Anything that you're going to save, I mean, really the expert advice is to keep it somewhere between 40 and 45 range. Like fridge temps, more or less. Above 35.
It depends on how long.
Really
you're gonna
closer
keep
to
it, though,
40 probably. But like if you could do it, if you really have the effort for doing it, then do that. It's going to age slower. It's going to age slower, and it's going to be less prominent as far as any changes that happen. Because I mean, like you find that the caramel in a darker beer or one of these is going to drastically change the warmer the beer is, and it's going to happen faster. It's going to make a much worse flavor that you don't want in the beer. It's going to oxidize much faster. Now, something that's, say, like a sour or whatever, that's a whole other animal. But even that, the wild stuff that's in there is going to change that beer in a different manner than you might expect. It could either, one, clean it up and make it fantastic, or two, take it way out of the territory that it was in and ruin it.
Well, when we're talking about aging a beer like this, we're not talking about like a wild beer where you're talking about microbes and that kind of thing acting on it and making it
when
different.
you're cellaring
this is a
something-
chemical reaction.
Yeah.
And chemical reactions happen faster in warmer temperatures.
It does.
That's
So
all.
does
shit
yeast
rocks.
activity. I mean,
So
that's
does
the kind
yeast
of
activity and that kind of thing. But,
even if you're bottle
you know,
conditioning, yeast activity can be that way. And if anything
yeah,
was wrong
but
with that
yeast
bottle,
activity in bottle conditioning drops off after a period of time. It doesn't
should,
happen anymore,
unless
you know.
something got into that bottle too. Which is
So if
another
you're-
thing. As a home brewer, if you were bottle conditioning and you're cellaring, if you weren't sure about your process at all, that's where your flaws are going to show up.
Would you say I think this one may taste more oxidized to me?
Yeah.
More oxidized? No,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Really?
I think it's.
I think those ones
I get more
better.
paper out of this though.
Yeah.
I
don't
think
know.
this one tastes exactly a year younger.
Which
It's
is
still,
3
still,
years
still not
overdue.
very good.
Still
one's
not
more
very
papery
good.
to me.
Still showing some very serious signs of aging.
Yeah, exactly.
So a question a lot of people may have, right? You talked about aging your homebrew. The advantage of aging your homebrew is you have the entire inventory, right? You
Right.
can open a bottle every month and see how it's
Which you
aging
should
and-
do.
Right.
Yeah.
Say you're only fortunate enough to get one bottle of a very rare beer. How do you make the decision to transfer it from the warm cellar to the cold cellar?
You
to
drink it.
Stop.
No, you just
Right,
drink it.
I know, right? So,
How do you decide when it's
and-
ready to drink? Is what you're asking?
and trust me, I'm big into wine as well. I collect wine, and to me, when I have a couple of bottles of a wine that I think is going to be really good, and I know it's getting close to prime, I'll open a bottle. I'm like, why did I open this? This is so good, and it would probably be good for another 5 years.
I think you find a difference
There's a mo-
there, though.
there's a
There's a
longer
difference
timeline
between
with
wine
No,
and beer.
I know, but it's the same idea, right? They're
well, yeah, the
It doesn't
concept,
matter
right?
the
But
product, the timelines may be different, but it's still a decision of when do you let it stop aging in your warm cellar and move it to your cold cellar to stop whatever.
well, the first part of that
chemical
is like
processes are going on.
knowing as like okay with the wine. I mean, if you have if there's a vineyard that's if you're getting a wine from there and you know that it needs time, you know that it needs time. That's one that's about tasting. When you get a beer from a brewery, for the most part, it's not leaving the brewery in the barrel room or wherever else that it's coming from for the kind of beer that they typically are. They shouldn't be leaving there for the most part not ready to drink. Most of the time you find that most breweries tend to age their stuff for you to drink right then. I mean, half
Yeah,
the time
and-
it's ready. I mean, it's like you got a year on it. you know,
I
at a good
completely
temperature.
agree,
you
but
know.
I'm gonna my counterpoint to that is most wineries don't release wines that are not ready to drink the day that you buy.
I think it's very difficult to draw a parallel.
Yeah, wine's harder for me to say that.
And we
yeah,
don't have to get into the wine story. My question more was for the average collector. If you only have 1 or 2 bottles, is there any kind of rule of thumb that you found that regarding age or style that would cause you to move a bottle into cold storage sooner rather than later?
Honestly, Sean,
and maybe that question is way too complex for this conversation, but
I think honestly, there's 3 styles of beer that you can do that with: Russian Imperial Stout, Belgian Quad, maybe Belgian Triple, and barley wine. I really think that's about it.
See,
you would want a cellar.
Personally, I think
I agree.
if you have 1 bottle of beer, I
to
think
start a
you save that
conversation, yeah.
you save that bottle of beer for a special occasion and you drink it.
right.
You don't try and age that because you don't
Cold.
have any idea. You've got to have a baseline. You got to know what that beer tastes like.
But
to
save it
begin
cold.
with.
Save
Save
it
it
cold.
cold,
If
save
you're
it
gonna
cold,
get
yeah.
one, then save it cold.
Yes.
Save
That's
it cold
what I-
and drink it on a special occasion. Then you know what that beer tastes.
Dude, I've got a
like.
bottle of DBA that I've had at the house for 4 years that's sitting really cold for this whole time. I've looked at the bottle just to see because I was like, should we open this just to see what it tastes like now? Because I feel like it's beyond it, you know. And I can see the sediment. You know, I can see what the bottle has changed. I'm like, it's not going to be as good as I want it to be.
Right.
It's not going to be the thing that I thought it would be. Had it been maybe a 10% beer of some kind, a stout or a quad or something like that, that higher range, it might be just fine right now. But I feel like it's going to fail me when I go to drink it. So
See, here's
the reason I threw the wine into the conversation is because the approach is significantly different in this regard. We don't cold crash wine, right? We don't chill wine to a serving temperature like we do for beer.
right.
We store wine at a temperature that we were eventually going to serve it at, right? That's the ideal way to age wine. If you have, let's say, 3 bottles of a particular beer, you put one in cold storage or cold crash one to taste now to see where it is now, and you leave the other 2 out for, let's just say, 6 months. That beer is going to change significantly from the one that you drank when you first got it.
Well,
And from the one in cold
so
temps.
I think
yeah.
when you're drinking them, if you pull them out of a warm cellar and you drink it and you like it, put it in a cold.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think you know, from that point forward, it's only going to go downhill, or it might get a little better, you know. But
Yeah, and I think people age beers too long. I think they do, and to me, you're
that's quite
choosing-
evident tonight. These are really
right,
old.
exactly. And you're choosing between the lesser of 2 evils because it's a guessing game to some extent. So would I rather drink a beer too early or too late? I'll take too
Too
early
early.
every single
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
You know, and honestly, it's to me, it's been my experience with homebrew. Even your Belgian Dark Strongs and your quads and your
The highest
you know,
ABV.
your
yeah.
highest ABV stuff. I try to drink them in 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, really,
There are
that's just-
very few beers that
If
are
they
good
are not
past 2
kept
years.
like absolutely cold, yeah, man, it's just they
What's the year
change
on
so
this one?
fast.
So I'm glad you said that because that was really kind of the point I was trying to get to, right? So the beer that we brought, I mentioned earlier that the first time I tried this recipe, it was a 5-year-old bottle of beer. It was fantastic, and I think a big reason for that was because Doug did a great job of brewing it, but it
Right.
had high alcohol content. It was bottle conditioned. It was stored properly, and so it survived the 5-year aging process. But the reality is that same beer we've brewed subsequently, at a year old, it is fantastic.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to keep that beer for frickin' 5 years.
Yes.
Great.
And that's why we only have 12 bottles left of the batch that we brewed a year ago, is because now we're drinking the shit out of it.
Well, and that's my
So-
philosophy. Beer is for drinking.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. And I talk to people all the time that have these big cellars of beer that they don't even know half of what's in there, and
They're just buying to buy.
Man, have you ever seen Chris Bradley? He has a freaking
I know.
spreadsheet
Right.
of when he puts the stuff in and when it's best to drink by, and I'm like, man, just
No.
drink
And
it.
that's a rare case.
called
Most
now.
people just stick it in the closet and they forget half the crap that's in
Which
there.
is not a good place to keep your
no.
beer.
Well,
Not in
Drink
Texas.
the beer.
Well, the thing with this quad was it was kind of an accident. I really didn't intend for it to be,
And that's
Good.
and that's
Didn't
the
intend for it to
problem.
be
Are
good.
there are those
Not
happy
good. What?
accidents
Right.
out there that are the exception to the rule that make everybody ruin a bunch of other beers because this
Right.
one ended
Right.
up being really
the
good.
secrets.
Yeah, and
Yes.
it just kills me
Well,
to know how
And
many.
by the way, that same thought process goes back to the wine too. I've been guilty of, I'm not going to open that because I opened a bottle of the same year of another winery and it was great, and I should have aged another year, and then I wait another year and open that bottle and it's terrible, right?
Yeah.
So
well, and
just
I think
drink the damn beer.
and I think even that with the wine too. I mean, to a certain extent, if you, it's better to drink a really good beer than an old crappy one.
Yep.
So
Yeah, it is.
even if it's
true.
it's not 100%.
That's what I'm saying. If you drink it before its prime, that's a lot better than drinking after its prime.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, for beer, both actually. It's very much a live beverage. I mean, you're still drinking something that's been alive for a long time by the time that you're actually putting it in the glass. So
As we sit here right now, everybody is making a whole bunch of beer to replace the beer that's sitting on shelves right now.
Yeah.
We have to drink up what's there in order to make room for the new
do
stuff.
your job,
Stop
damn it!
letting it sit there,
Now, I'll tell you a funny story about aging beer. So, when I used to brew at Grapevine, there was an occasion where there were a couple of pallets of beer that had gone out of date per our distributor. I had the opportunity to take home I won't tell you how many, but a lot of cases of their oatmeal
lot.
stout, right? And in cans, that beer has been sitting in my garage for 2 years now. In my garage.
Texas garage.
Adjusting
Texas
like,
garage.
different temperatures and
Today it's 30 degrees in my garage. Last week it was 80 degrees in my garage.
Right.
Tomorrow will be 70.
Welcome to Texas.
And I'm going to tell you something. That was always my favorite beer at Grapevine when I worked there. And that beer in cans sitting in my garage has gotten better every year that it's sat out there. And the only reason I know this because I would have probably thrown it out based on the way I've stored it. But my wife is a stout freak, and when I don't have our stouts on tap at the house, she goes out there and throws a 6-pack of of this beer in the refrigerator. And so I sample a can every now and then, and I swear to God, it is getting better and better with age, which is totally
Against the rules.
against the rules, right?
Dude, it's a stout, though. It's a stout.
Such a moving target. It really is.
How big is that beer?
It's not very big at all. It's
no, it's not.
like
I think it's the dark malts. that handle that.
6.5%.
And it's
Yeah.
just an
It's a dark
exception to the
malts,
rule.
yeah.
It's all
And
it
it's because
is.
it's in cans, not bottles.
And cans. Cans do help, but still, dark malt, man. Dark
Well,
malts.
I don't know that cans
big
necessarily
difference
help.
there.
There's
I think they're
They
different
help a
wild
little,
cards.
but I think dark malt
it
is the key
depends
to
on the
that.
canning line. It depends on the canning line because some canning lines don't efficiently flush out all the CO2.
You're right.
All canning lines are not equal.
And I will tell you at the time this particular batch was canned.
Yeah, don't put your hand on there.
Why?
I don't know.
You sound like you're channeling right to the soul of
It makes me
everyone
feel
that's listening.
comfortable.
Germs.
makes you feel like you're doing this.
I will tell you
the quads are kicking in.
at the time this particular batch was canned. We were still having issues with DO in our canning line,
Right.
And it took a number of runs over a long period of time to kind of work those problems out. So I don't even think this beer was optimally canned, right? So,
Okay, here's a question. Just sorry to interrupt, but here's a question on that one. For we don't, as far as homebrewers go, we're thinking typically of putting it in a brown bottle with a cap on it, oxygen absorbing cap. You have a can that's meant to. I mean, you should be pushing out all the oxygen in the first place.
Right.
There should not be that much in there in the first place, before it gets sealed. Now, here's something between the two: is that, like, if you have a can, there should be less oxygen there in the first place, and you don't have to worry about all that. Now, with a cap on a bottle, the cap could still be sucking. I mean, I've seen some like of different breweries around town that have the oxygen absorbing bottle caps, and they look like horrible, nasty spider webs.
Yep.
The older they get,
Yep.
like the top of that bottle cap. But a can is not going to look like that. So maybe there's a little bit of difference in that on terms of, like, there's no oxygen ingress, and everything is staying the same within that can.
I totally agree that helps.
So,
Here's my problem with this thing.
It's just
But
the
if you're putting
temperature
oxygen in
range.
the can before you put
Right,
the
right,
lid
right,
on,
yeah.
that can lead to problems.
Yeah.
We need to be able to
Or make
look
it
at stories
delicious.
like you just told for exactly what they are. They're anecdotal.
They are very much.
Because the problem I have with the homebrewing community is that they take anecdotal results and use them as practices.
Yeah.
And there's a particular experimental blog out there that I think is particularly guilty of this, that takes one brew and one set of circumstances and one set of results
And 20 people.
and then applies those. Now you can go brew your beer like this. And I think we have to
Be a little
take
be a
these
little more
things
scientific
for what
than
they
that.
are, that there are exceptions to rules. And that's what I think the story you just told is a perfect example of, in that there are exceptions to rules. There's no way that beer should be better now. There's no way it should be doing what, and that's going to happen sometimes. But in our brewing, as we examine our processes and our results and the things we do, we have to be able to recognize things for being anomalies and not necessarily indicative of a good brewing practice. Because
And
you're not advocating that as a good brewing process.
Definitely not. And I hope you recognize I'm playing
Absolutely.
devil's advocate.
Absolutely.
And I think it's very germane, probably accidentally, to the conversation we're having tonight, that we have these three philosopher examples here.
Yes.
Because,
They're terrible.
They're just old.
They're just old. Yeah. They're very old. And
Well,
Here's
here's the thing. We're drinking.
I think the key here, though, is that we tend to collect these beers,
Yeah.
instead of drink these beers.
Yeah, no.
And
Always about drinking it.
Right.
Well,
And
Drink
I
your
understand-
damn beer.
I understand standing in line for 3 hours to get a special release, and you wanting to hold on to that bottle because of the time you invested in getting that bottle, but drink the damn beer.
Yeah, drink your damn beer.
And I would say though that drinking this 2017, God, I wish we'd have had a 16 and a 15.
yeah.
And the
Yes.
reason I say that is because
So I can go to the store.
To me, this one's not aged enough. To me, it's still kind of hot. You don't get the dark fruit character that you do. This is 2017.
But I would take that over the two old
I
ones
would
every
too.
time, and
Yeah.
that's the thing I get from it is
I agree.
when in doubt, drink it early.
Honestly, with this
So
particular
glad we
beer,
drank it.
this particular beer, I think tastes great when it's 2 years old. 2 years old.
I agree with you on that.
I mean, every when I had this 2011, when I thought it was the most amazing beer I'd ever had, it was in 2013.
Right.
And so,
Well, this also comes back to, like, I think we can all agree that
But
we're
it
agreeing
ha-
with what
Right.
flavor range here is too. But then the other part of it is, like, what do you specifically like about the beer? What does
But-
Brandon like? What do I like? What do they like? It's you know.
But I would say that when I got those 2011s and 2013, and that to me that you guys know as big a beer nerd as I am. When I remember a beer back in 2013, it was impressive to me.
Right.
No, you're right. You're right.
And one of the things that I thought was really amazing was that, this particular beer was really awesome to me. But
Eric
it was
wants
like,
a Kit Kat. He keeps signaling us that he wants a
what
Kit
he's
Kat.
signaling. I think he has to pee.
Well, go pee, dude.
So do I.
Just put it
He
on a
wants to
group
pee
shot
on a
and let it
Kit Kat.
pee. But anyway, I think that
I tried to blame it on you, Eric. Sorry. Didn't work out.
Just go, man.
yeah, just
You're
go
good.
pee, man. But
Right here
not
at
long
the
enough.
table.
you can just put
headphone
it.
Push your way through. That's all you have to do.
But the point being that I think that I think we really went down a rabbit hole with the cellaring thing. But ultimately, I think you can kind of cap it with this: drink it within 2 years.
Yeah, well, the thing
Rule
though
of
is,
thumb.
I think that it's a great hand-in-hand topic with this type of beer.
Yeah, I do too.
Because the question is, when you brew this kind of beer, when is the right time to drink it? We're talking about that the entire time. When we're brewing, I brewed mine, drank it in a couple months. We all liked it. You're drinking yours. You're saying it needs more age on it. So when is it? And I think your question was a really good one, Shawn, in that if you've got one or two beers of one that you tried really hard to get, when do you drink it? And it just kills me to think that so many people hang on to these beers until way past their prime.
And they're ruined. They never
And they're
drank them.
ruined. They never drank
never
it.
had
You might as well
even
just
one beer of
Pour
that.
it down the goddamn drain.
At least have
You know?
the two and drink one and then wait and see what happens. Do not waste that
and if
beer
you
that you
have
spent
one-
that time for.
I really
or
like
money.
the thought process. If you're gonna buy these beers, buy multiple bottles.
Drink
Support
one
your
now.
local brewery.
Yep.
But I'm glad we went down the rabbit hole because I think a lot of people struggle with this subject, right? Collectors
God.
especially, and I'm no exception. I have 7 years worth of KBS in my refrigerator right now, and I refuse to open any of them.
Well, they're in your fridge at least. I mean,
I
they're not going to be that
know.
great, but still.
Drink the beers, Shawn.
Drink
I
the
know.
beers.
I'm gonna go home
man.
and drink them all tonight.
You should.
I'm just gonna have a flight.
Okay, no,
I won't remember any of them.
wait, hold on. How
come back
about
next
we all go to
Thursday.
your house and we all help you drink the beers for 7 years.
Sounds like a terrible idea.
7 years of beers at Shawn's
That's
house.
7 sips of beer for me. Nope.
Oh, I remember this beer.
I don't think I'm going to go and hang out at Sean's ever
Well,
again.
I would
like
say
that.
this that
Chris is the only one that's allowed to come over for the KBS flight.
Nate Weber and I and 3 of his friends drank maybe 4 of us. Me and 4
There's
other
something
guys
weird with that.
drank a sixtel of KBS one night.
What is that? Shit, what the hell is that?
Yeah, that was not a good next day.
Bathwater.
So this
It was
this
a
beer,
great day.
Smells soapy. Yeah, like
Who
bathwater.
said
Bathwater.
Who
Yeah, I
said that?
did.
Was
I
it you
said
that said
bathwater.
bathwater?
Man, this is
That's what it
nuts.
reminds me of. Is
What
Smells
is
like
this?
the kids in the tub.
Well, we don't need to say it on the air. It's
We don't.
Not, I mean,
I remember when I saw the bottle, I thought, "Oh, I remember that beer." And now that I drink, I thought, "Oh, I remember that beer."
All right, well,
Because
let's
I have
drink
had
this last
before
one.
and did not enjoy it.
This one. That's
I'm very
nasty.
surprised at our low success rate here.
I'm not even sure.
Sean, just give up. The
smells
lava
like-
lamp's not going to work, dude.
I'll get it fixed
Oh,
at
really?
the break if we ever take one.
We
I know
already-
there's
we
no more
already
breaks.
Took a break.
We took a
We
break.
took a
Smells
break.
like- this smells like rubbing alcohol.
The last time I had that beer was wonderful.
Really?
This is not that
You know,
That is
it's
phenomenal.
It's like when you get a new pair of Vans.
So it reminds me of 2 things: bathwater and a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really like it smells like rubbing alcohol.
Talking about the
though.
smell when you get a new pair of Vans, that new rubber
Yes.
smell.
Yes. Right?
All right, let's drink this last one. And one of the things that I want to really cover, because I think this is really important to the brewing this style. I know we got into cellaring it and we talked about the grain bill, but ultimately is I think what is the most important is yeast management in this particular style, and the reason being is because it is high in alcohol. And we talked about it earlier. That's not that crappy one, was it? I don't have any more.
No, it's a
spill
good
buckets.
one. It's a good one. I
I don't
poured
have
you a
any
good
more
one.
spill buckets, but the
That
thing
one's
that's
much
really,
better.
The thing that's really important is that the yeast management on this particular style, and
Yes.
I think that is paramount in being able to have the dryness that you need.
You know,
for
you're
this
right,
particular
and we
style.
did kind of skip over that, and you're absolutely
We did.
right. That is an absolute key to
And,
brewing this.
one of the things that I do with this particular style, and I go overboard. I mean, when I do this style,
huge starter.
I do 5 liters of starter and 2 smack packs, and
oh,
and
your
then-
glass is full, dude.
I know because somebody poured it in there.
See, dude, here's one thing I did. Pete and I just did a one that was about right under 1,100, and I did a 2-pack, 2-liter starter just to get them rolling. And that thing went wild, and I just checked it, and it's been 6 days, and it is about from about 1,100 to maybe 1028. And I was surprised by that because it went absolutely wild. And I was thinking it'd be a little further down, you know. So, and that's at 62. So I put it out in warm temperatures and whatnot just to see. So I'm hoping it actually dries out, but it tastes amazing. So that's a good thing, you know. Yeah. But like I think that's the thing with the starter range on that. It's like I don't think I would have had anywhere with that if I'd have put the 2 packs in without the starter on top of it. So
that one may actually be the worst one we had tonight.
If I was running a BJCP class, and
the
I wanted
Epis
to just to
4?
give an example of something that was cloying, that's
oxidized and oxidized.
Yeah,
but, that is oxidized. Yeah.
But you know, the problem ultimately, I want to get back. I really want to hit on this point because I think it's extremely important for this particular style is overdo your yeast, and not only that, you know, what you need to do is to make sure that you make a huge starter. If you're going to use liquid yeast, I think this is one style that does better with liquid yeast. I don't really. I mean, I like T58, but it doesn't dry out to the level that I would like it to.
No,
so,
I think like I was talking about. What I was just telling you, that's the Belgian Ardennes.
T58 doesn't eat.
That tastes amazing right now. Yeah. And a 2-liter starter, it went absolutely batshit. And like I had to get some stuff out and like really work at it to keep it from filling up the fermenting chamber for that.
Well, what a lot of people don't realize is that T58 it has a really great Belgian character.
Right.
But the problem is that it doesn't eat Maltotriose.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
Maltotriose?
Maltotriose is a 3-chain sugar.
Okay.
So it can't break those down. So it doesn't attenuate as well as maybe what a different style yeast would. So, as a matter of fact, you know, one of the things that we actually had talked to with Kevin at Fermentus is we talked to him about, and he's the one that brought that particular thing up with us. And he said, you know, one of the things that we've done is use the T58 to get the Belgian character, and then use the Abbey L strain or the BE256 to dry it out with. So because the BE256 is a monster. It is a diastaticus, however, though. So if you're afraid of the diastaticus infection and all that good stuff that everybody's become much more aware of, the BE256 is a diastaticus strain. So, but it does dry it out to no end, and that's the reason being is because it is a diastaticus strain, which means that when a yeast strain is diastaticus, it means that it can actually produce enzymes to break long-chain sugars down to simpler sugars. So, however, when I make this, though, I typically go on a liquid. I do liquid. I really like it's the Belgian Strong Ale, which is it's derived from the West Mall strain, which I really like that strain. I use that for my triples and my quads. Usually do double packs into a 5-liter starter, and then I oxygenate,
possibly twice,
and then oxygenate after 18 hours.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because when you do that what that does is that prolongs the growth curve. You grow even more cells. Because a lot of people don't realize that I mean, when you actually sit there and study it, you know that yeast. When the first 18 to 24 hours, all they're doing is reproducing. They're not really. Not really
that depends.
That
depends on the alcohol, or the oxygen content of the wort too.
Well,
if there's not oxygen present.
Well, that's why he's talking about double dosing the oxygen.
Well, but the other side of that is if you don't oxygenate, they're going to go right out of phase and into fermentation. And you don't.
But the population is not going to be great enough to finish fermentation.
Right.
That's exactly my point. Is when you oxygenate. And then you hit it again at the 18 to 24 hours, you're prolonging the growth phase.
Right.
Well, why do you want to do that? Well,
you're
first
making a starter in your fermenter. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. And not only do you do that, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that when you don't have enough yeast to begin with, a lot of people, my fermentation gets stuck. That's a problem with this style. It's a problem with triples. It's a problem with, Russian Imperial stouts. People all the time come in. So
But one of the things you want to keep in mind about that too, and we talked about that when Nick was in, is making sure that your yeast don't go out of phase. So,
Right.
we're talking about different phases, and the phase we're talking about is prolonging the growth phase. And you want to make sure that if you're going to hit it with oxygen more than once, that you do it while it's still in the growth phase.
Yeah, and I always say that
And
18
so-
hours is a good time.
But if you do it a little bit sooner, that's better than doing it a little bit later.
yeah, I
But
agree.
part of the point he was trying to make too, and you may have missed this when he stepped out, was the preference in this style for liquid yeast versus dry yeast, right?
right.
And I totally respect where you're coming from, but I do want to dissent a little bit and refer
That's
back to
fine.
my stroke of genius that you mentioned earlier.
And I've got to agree with Shawn on this one.
For that particular case, the M31, it does a great job. I mean, the beer that we tried earlier, that starts out as a 98 OG beer, and that yeast will hammer down to 04, like without even trying.
And to my knowledge, that's the first dry yeast that has this type of flavor profile and that type of fermentation profile.
Right. And
So I don't know of another one. So when he's saying use liquid yeast, I think it's because
Well, that's
And that's-
my preference, probably.
That's with one oxygen hit at the
Yeah.
beginning, right? I'm not doing a supplemental oxygen. That's one oxygen hit.
Well, and you
or-
probably don't need to in dry yeast as much.
Well, right. But still, for what I expect out of that yeast for this beer, it does an amazing job.
It does, yeah.
It was actually an accident that I found it. I was looking for a different yeast and I couldn't find it. It wasn't available. So I settled on the M31 and it produced really, really acceptable results. So, which
Are we still talking about the
yeah, and that's not the yeast
mango-
that Doug used in his original recipe that I tried that was 5 years old that I fell in love with. It was a different yeast. We still got a very similar result out of it.
my point back on the double oxygenation, though, when you were talking about 18 hours, is that one of the things that Nick stressed when you're talking about hitting it with oxygen more than one time is that you've got to make sure that if you hit it with oxygen again, that it's still within the growth phase.
Yeah, I agree.
So if you don't think
because otherwise you oxidize your beer.
or you move your yeast out of phase. They go from the growth phase into fermentation, and then they stop and they go back into growth phase.
Yeah, they don't like
and
it.
you don't want them to do that.
So how do you ensure that?
So what I'm saying is, if you're not sure and you want to do it at 10 or 12 hours, that's a better error factor than if you're a few hours too late.
But is there a rule of thumb or a visual that you can use to
Visual, I really don't
ensure
think
that
there is.
you're not you haven't moved into that phase?
Hey, you know what I've done to ensure that? Hit it at 10 and then at 18.
Yeah. If you keep hitting it with oxygen, as long as there's oxygen present in the wort, yeast will not produce alcohol.
Well, this is not foolproof, but if you're using a blow-off tube, especially, and sometimes with an airlock, if there's no activity coming out of either, they're probably still in growth phase, right?
Probably, and no croissant forming.
That blow-off
Yeah.
or the airlock is not moving if there's no CO2 being produced. So you can feel reasonably confident if there's no activity yet in either that you're still in your growth phase and can hit it with more oxygen.
Yeah, but since we're talking about a guessing game, my point is what Nick was telling us was err on the side of too early rather than too late.
Right.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And those concepts are great to know in your head, but a lot of homebrewers, they got to go to work in the morning, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
They can't be there at that exact time.
That's why I'm saying if you can't,
Right.
then do it earlier, and it's
If
not
you
going to
want-
hurt
If
to
you
do
want
it
to
earlier.
really get crazy, go back and listen to our Grant Wood episode about him doing 36, 48 hours worth of pure oxygen for 48 hours. I mean, just like they continually do it the whole time. That was for
That was for
the,
Utopia.
Utopias, yeah.
But that can cause problems too, right? I mean, you run the risk of
Oxidation.
green apple and all
Yeah.
the other associated problems with too much oxygen. So
Yeah, I don't think you want to get that crazy, but
Well,
if you're going to hit it
come on,
with
man.
more than one dose of oxygen,
When you get
my
to
only point was-
25% alcohol, who could care a hell of I mean, you can't taste anything else anyway. I mean, oh yeah, it has some butter in it. No,
As long as you get the alcohol first.
I thought this
I
was
disagree.
Scotch.
It tastes like cognac at 25%.
So one of the things that we meant to do coming back from the break, and
Yeah.
we should have done as soon as we came back,
And we'll put it in the audio.
we'll put it in the audio.
it's here
and
now.
in the future, we'll be better about this. We're going to give you a coupon code.
Some stuff and things.
So our coupon code this week is for 20% off the Dragon de Oro Dark Strong Ale, all grain and extract recipe kits. So it's worth mentioning that this particular
It's a long
kit,
song.
Stubby's dad brewed, and very inexperienced brewer brewed this kit and
And won
won
a Stein at
a
Blue Bonnet.
Stein at Blue Bonnet, which is a first place in the Belgian Dark Strong
And you
category.
know what
And a
do
very
I know?
hard
what do I
competition.
know? He used dry T58, so
Right,
Yeah.
right. So,
did all right.
so the discount code is going to be Dragon20, Dragon and the 20,
and that's 20% off.
20% off
that's a
that
really
kit.
good
Yeah, so if you actually make it to this far, that code's not going to go away for a while. So
No, yeah, it's a one use per customer.
One use per customer.
So
And by the
anybody who's
way-
listening to this for the future, order
Get on
it.
and use it.
Speaking of Stubby's dad, can we throw out a few prayers for Stubby's dad?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers to Walt, everybody.
Get well soon, Walt.
But anyhow,
So, in closing, in future episodes,
We
we're
all
going to
love
work
Walt.
on
closing.
aren't we?
Oh,
Are we
I think
not?
so.
We closed at 6.
oh. we're out.
Website's still open. You can
We're-
order anytime.
Well, we're out of beer.
We're out of quads. I got some Modelo back there.
What?
That's for the after party.
That
So
is
that-
the sign of
the
us
Modelo
closing,
was
right?
That's
actually
for
for us.
rehydration.
When we're
Stubby.
down to Modelo,
Easy.
isn't that the sign of the end? of
Modelo
the
was
episode?
for us to actually start talking about cellaring beer because Modelo you want to cellar.
Yes.
We have a growler back there of cherry vanilla porter from OHB that we can break
Okay.
into as well.
Cool.
So it's nice that they brought beer from another brewery
We love
for us to try.
Oh yeah. Before you
Other
go
than
though,
the one
love our
fantastic
friends at
bottle.
OHB.
before you go though, give us your timeline. Where people can follow you
Yeah.
on Facebook.
Yes, definitely.
Give us a
You
shout
guys are
out,
right
all the
at it,
different
right?
stuff,
I mean,
We're ready to come eat your food and drink your beer.
Absolutely.
meat and
Oh,
beer.
sorry.
You have no idea.
So we are waiting for the city to bestow on us our permits for construction.
Why don't you hurry up and wait?
Tomorrow, actually, I'll be packaging all the junk in the building up that we've been using to brew over the last year and a half to put into stores to get ready for remodeling. We're hoping to have our permits any day now. We've been having a really great constructive conversation with the city over the last several weeks about our plans.
About construction.
I'm sorry? Yeah, exactly.
Constructive about construction.
So, it should be any time now. We'll be getting started on remodeling, and we're really looking forward to that.
Yeah. Where can the guys follow
if-
you on social media?
If you guys have been by the building recently, you've noticed we've got all of our brewing equipment in the backyard that has arrived. I think we're one of the few breweries that I've ever heard of that had their equipment in advance of actually needing it, which is a great problem to have.
Like way in advance.
If you can
Dry
afford it.
aging your equipment.
So you're just like a home brewer. You have your brewing equipment in the backyard.
Exactly, right? So you can follow us on Facebook,
It's better than the back door.
Twitter, and Instagram.
Cowtown Brew Co.
Exactly.
There you go. Awesome.
Cowtown Brew Co. Everybody.
We are anxiously awaiting the opening. For speaking for myself, I absolutely cannot wait for you guys to open to have a true
Well-
brew pub with food and
Dude.
and your beer. I've always tasted.
We're
beer
super excited
and
about that, yeah.
meat.
I can't wait because
Barbecue.
it's on my way
Come
home.
on. I know it's right down the road. It's so
Hey, and
close.
one more big thing that happened since the last time we were here, we launched our new branding. I had a bunch of stickers in my truck, and Doug and I decided to Uber here, so they're still in my truck.
Aw.
But Doug, show your notebook up to the camera right there. Or that. Yeah,
Look,
that'll
he's
work
got a
too.
bunch of
Oh
stickers.
yeah.
Oh man, now
Turn
my
it, turn
cooler's
it.
out of date.
That's our new logo. You can update your cooler tonight for $399.99. I'm kidding.
$400 a sticker.
Doug,
Hook you up.
Deal.
here,
Um,
Doug,
we're really excited about the new branding. Over there, Doug. There's the camera. There you go.
Wow.
All right.
Look at that.
I really
fancy
like that.
goat
That's
gentleman.
a fancy cow.
Yeah.
I want one.
So the
You can
cow
tell.
the cow's a great story, right?
That cow's
so
discerning.
we
Dapper.
we
You know the day you'll arrive when they have you see some chick have them on each nipple, then you know you've arrived.
the stickers on it. Yeah.
No, you truly read when you have a guy. with it.
Wow, that went from discerning to just right down to the basement. I mean,
Right. Yeah. So we
That's what we
that's
do.
me. So we our old logo we really liked a lot, but one of the problems with it was a standalone thing. We couldn't break it apart into its elements and use different pieces of it for different things. So this new logo kind of solves that problem. But more importantly, if you look at the steerhead, especially, he's got a tie on and a jacket and a bowler cap, and we felt like that reflected the beer styles that we brew a little better than our original logo. We do a lot of European styles. We talked about the Belgian tonight, but we do a lot of German lagers and some English styles as well. And we wanted a logo that kind of reflected that European angle, if you will. So we're really excited about it. We launched it about 5 weeks ago, and so
Yeah,
new look for us.
And not only the European angle, but I mean the Fort Worth. I mean how synonymous it is with Fort Worth.
Cowtown.
Right.
That's the biggest portion of that, and so
Yeah.
I think
Even though you're not in the stockyards,
You know what? You're only like
short drive.
I think
you
it's
may
a
as well
plus that
be
you're
like
not in the
20 feet
stockyards.
from the
I
damn
agree.
stockyards
I'll
as
just
far
give
as
you a
being
hard
in
time.
Fort Worth. So, yeah,
Where are we right now?
you're right there. You're right at the edge of town.
Yeah, don't
so,
get
I
me
mean,
started about the stockyards.
I don't ever go to the stockyards.
Yeah, I
Highly
know.
overrated. In my
You would never
opinion.
get to see me if you were in the stockyards.
I mean, if you're,
That'd be a good
if you're
thing.
rolling in
Doug,
from
let's go to the stockyards
121,
right now. Stubby's not going to be there, guaranteed.
we're in the stockyards.
Thanks for having us, brother.
No.
Hey,
thanks.
cheers for
man.
being here. Thanks for coming back.
Don't cheers me with your dump cup. There
Yeah,
you go.
yeah,
There you
no
go.
doubt. Right. Hey, thanks, Shawn. Shawn has always been a good friend of the shop and a personal friend to me. So
Hopefully, you
thank you
feel good
guys.
about actually being able to give out information tonight.
yeah.
So-
There wasn't that many distractions.
We're not going to
Just
have to.
a few.
We're not going to have a.
No,
We're not going to have
no.
to redo this one, are we?
The only disappointment tonight was
Are
that
three?
my freaking lava lamp wasn't plugged into a power source, and we've just got.
Trust me, I'm with you.
They
on that.
haven't
I
been.
thought the vibe was a lot better when we had the lava
I
lamps
know.
going all the
Yeah,
time.
but it fucks up the cameras.
That one's not either.
Screw the cameras. Lava lamps.
We don't cut the F word out anymore. So.
Yeah, no. I try to keep those. to
We're
a
crazy
minimum.
like that. So in future episodes,
God, I feel like I was
we're
on
working
Family
on-
Feud all of a sudden. That was 3
future
X's, I
episodes.
think.
We're working on some ideas for experiments and brew days to get a variety of results to bring in. Plus, we'll have more breweries on the phone or in studio to soon to discuss their beer and help you brew better beer. Again, please be sure to check out our Patreon account at patreon.com/Come and Brew It Radio to help us support the show. We have $2, $5, $10, and $20 options because every little bit counts. Plus, we want to reward you while you get to keep the show going, get involved, and help improve it. In fact, we literally reward a lucky patron at the end of every month and with something interesting in a random drawing from the names of all our $5, $10, and $20 patrons.
The end of the month is coming up.
So
Yes,
thanks
it is.
again for listening to Come and Brew It Radio. Be sure to share with your friends on social media and give us some ratings on iTunes and Stitcher. And send any ideas or comments to info@texasbrewinginc.com. And you can always check it on the brew days of our guys at
Turn the page.
Brew focused Facebook pages at Brew with Stubby, at Brew with Brando, Brew with Mikey B, Brew with Chris, Brew with Greg, and Brew with Nigel.
Brew with Nigel!
Woo! Hey, can I ask 2 quick questions
No,
before we
it's too
sign
late.
off? No, really.
Where's
These are
Richard
really important.
Dawson? Where's
So
Richard
the
Dawson?
first one
Questions.
is actually not a question; it's an observation. I've been watching Narcos the last couple of weeks, and every time
We're better?
you
Oh.
said patron on here, I thought you were talking about Patron, which is really
We are
confusing.
bosses.
But seriously,
That would be.
Yes, yes.
our friends at Turning Point got some really good news this week. So you
Yes,
guys definitely need to
sir.
reach out to them, get them back on because they've got some great news to share. And it sounds like they're going to be open soon. We love those guys and what
March.
they're doing. And
Early March.
yeah, hoping to see some great success out of them really soon.
And you know, on that note,
They make some really good beer.
we've talked a lot about this New England IPA
We love those guys.
styles and everything, and what it is, and trying to form opinions on it and all that. When we had them in here, I was very impressed with their beer and very impressed with them, and I cannot wait to go give them some of my money and taste their beer.
It's almost time.
I'm excited for that.
Some of your money, not all of your money.
Of course, not all of my money. That would be a horrible mistake.
Sean, you'll get some of
Pay my
our money
mortgage
too.
or, you know.
All right, guys. Until next time, come and brew
Come
it.
and brew it.
Come and brew it.
Come on, brew it.
Cheers.
I think you should do it.
The Meat Sweats podcast sounds like a great idea.
Shout out everybody in the streets. Ride, Johnny, ride.